all the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs, fuck you. War.
Quite sure he's right. Obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
War.
This is the end game.
All right, everybody. It is Tuesday, June 10th, 2025, the 142nd day of dystopia. Oh, wait. The 142nd day of the golden age. The days of dystopia, they are behind us. But are they? That's what we'll talk about today. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. See, this is what happens when I'm off for a couple of days, miss a Friday, miss a Monday, and all of a sudden we're back into the days of dystopia. So I hate to cause any sort of dystopia, and I hope that you can all successfully recover from that error. All right, so we're going to obviously talk about the Summer of Love #2 that is starting. Who does #2 work for? Where are my Austin Powers clips when I need them? We're going to talk a little bit about some of the Trump executive actions toward the end of the week last week that we did not get to amidst the celebrity breakup story. And so first, of course, we have to check in on the two most powerful voices on the internet, the two most famous trolls in the world, two extremely powerful billionaires who were best friends and have since grown apart, or at least we're being shown that they've grown apart. So over the weekend, they went from their all-out war of words that we saw on Thursday and accusations about Donald Trump being an Epstein-linked pedophile or something to a calmed down relationship between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. They are amicably negotiating a temporary separation at this point, just figuring out who gets custody and the like. So let's start here with Elon. And this is not Elon in particular, but this is what happened on Saturday night. Now, the immediate takeaway, as we talked about on Thursday, from the Trump and Elon split is that there were a number of people who have been Trump aligned since the fake campaign of 2024, maybe at some point in 2023, but they're the people who were never Trump and then sometimes Trump during the first term and then wanted to get past Trump and supported somebody else in the Republican primary, fake though it was, in 2022, 2023, in the first part of 2024. And then once all of that was past them, they were realigned with Trump full bore throughout the campaign, because saying anything against Trump at that point, well, You're helping Biden win the fake election, or then Kamala. And now they're sometimes Trump again. And so Elon Musk fighting with Donald Trump gave them the perfect opportunity to side with Elon. Maybe this will be the time that they can get rid of Donald Trump. And so what we had was a massive online popularity contest between Musk and Trump. Who would the people side with? Elon even threatened, I forgot to mention this on Thursday, but he even threatened to start a new political party that was going to attract the 80% of people in the middle. There is no middle. Nobody's in the middle. Nobody's a centrist. People pretend to be centrists because they think having some views from each side is a coherent philosophy. And really all they're doing is figuring out which moral stories they want to associate and identify with, right? So if they're in very liberal communities, well, maybe they're pro-choice. And if they're in very conservative communities, all of these being party of false decorum communities, well, maybe then they're pro-life, but they don't really want to stop abortion. They just want to speak out against it because that's how they identify. So there is no middle, and there's certainly no 80% of the middle. Donald Trump won the election in 2020, won the election in 2024. Basically, everybody understands that he won the election in 2024, including with a popular vote majority. And the vast, overwhelming amount of the Republican Party and all of those Trump voters are still very much on board with Donald Trump. So there is no 80% of the country that's going to leave Donald Trump. And we had that on full display on Saturday night. We've discussed this many times before. It happens continuously. Every time the country needs to see that Donald Trump is still wildly popular, he goes to a UFC match. And then for this one, the White House even posted a video at whitehouse.gov from the...
You thought it couldn't get any more festive inside Prudential Center. The President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, flanked by our UFC CEO, Dana White. Great to have the 47th President of the United States with us at another massive UFC pay-per-view event tonight at The Rock here in Newark, New Jersey. Tremendous experience for these fans to get to witness this live and in person.
Is Elon going to win that popularity contest? No. Nobody is going to win a popularity contest against Donald Trump right now. And it's not even close, which is, and we'll get to this later, which is why it's so funny that the left, the mainstream media, is attempting to portray Donald Trump as unpopular and panicking. The people are leaving him as a result of the ICE raids and then the ICE protests in Los Angeles. Nothing could be further from the truth. And you see it right there. He's still wildly popular with the people. So this is Elon Musk saying something very strange, and it's impossible to know what exactly he meant. But this was in the wake of the Trump drama. This was from Sunday. He says, whatever happens, we have got the spaceships and they do not. 4 simple lines of poetry about spaceships. So what are spaceships? Are those Elon's rockets that he threatened to withhold from Donald Trump the other day? He's going to take his Dragon spaceship and go home because of their little online spat. And then he, of course, scaled that back and was like, fine, I'll keep giving you the spaceships. And then he says, we have spaceships and you don't. Then he had a nice little exchange with Thomas Massey, who wanted to be part of we and not part of they, the people that don't have spaceships. It's all about spaceships, I guess. Elon Musk actually declared that that was a Rorschach test of sorts. And if you're not familiar with the Rorschach test is the ink blot test from the early 1900s. A psychiatrist named Hermann Rorschach had these ink blots, and I think that they're all symmetrical, left to right. And he would show them to a patient, and that patient would describe what they saw in the ink blot, and then the analysis would proceed from their answers. So that weird little poem, its meaning is determined in the eye of the beholder. What exactly does it mean? I have no idea. I don't know if Elon has spaceships and they don't. Elon seems to have spaceships insofar as there are spaceships, but you could also say he's just firing rockets up into the sky and then catching them with his little mechanical arms down on the ground. I don't know about spaceships, man. I don't really want to hear about spaceships all that much, but if he's just using coded language for something that's happening here, if they have the next generation technology and the other side doesn't, well, then I think that would probably be an important distinction. So maybe that's what he's saying. Maybe one day we'll find out, or maybe like how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, the world may never find out. This is from yesterday in CNN. LA protests inch Elon Musk closer to Trump. Oh, man. I was just told that they broke up and they're already getting back together. They inch him back to President Trump, I should have said. From the article. Over the weekend, Musk deleted some of his most incendiary ex-posts about the president, including the call for his impeachment and the allegation without providing evidence that Trump's name appeared in documents related to the crimes of convicted sex offender and financier Jeffrey Epstein. Musk appeared to wholeheartedly support the Trump administration's stance on the situation in Los Angeles, adding American flags to a post from Vice President J.D. Vance about how, quote, the president will not tolerate rioting and violence. Musk has long supported closed borders, stopping illegal immigration and deportations in alignment with the Trump administration. The tech billionaire posted a screenshot of a Truth Social post from Trump that said California Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, quote, should apologize to the people of Los Angeles. As clashes have broken out, cars have been set on fire and demonstrations intensify. He also wrote cool to a video of Vance speaking in an interview, saying he thinks, quote, if Elon chills out a little bit, everything will be fine. And thank goodness, because if Elon didn't chill out a little bit and everything was not fine, man, that would be the one thing that could stop what is coming. Nothing can stop what is coming except if Elon Musk doesn't chill out a little bit. Elon Musk hasn't even said sorry once. Nothing can stop what's coming unless Elon Musk fails to say, I'm sorry, at least once. Or thank you even. So as far as the Epstein thing goes, what a strange saga that was on Thursday afternoon. Because at the same time that Elon was insinuating that Donald Trump was somehow linked in some negative way to Jeffrey Epstein and that the quote unquote Epstein files would prove that, Kash Patel was on Joe Rogan's show, kind of avoiding the Epstein file question and the Trump-Elon question. And that's fine. Info ops are info ops. We don't always know what they mean. Maybe the entire Epstein thing is a rug. People should consider that. And maybe that's what we're being shown in these continued iterations of mentions of the Epstein files, as though something productive is going to come. And then immediately we realize, oh, wait, nothing's coming. J.D. Vance at the same time was also on with the comedian Theo Vaughn, and there was no addressing of these subjects whatsoever. So the Epstein thing fell totally flat. Elon Musk removed that post, removed the impeachment post, and some other posts. Now he and Trump are on polite terms, though not back together, just amicably negotiating their temporary separation. This is from the Wall Street Journal this morning. One more Elon story, and we will move on from Elon. See, I can do poetry too. U.S. agencies tracked foreigners traveling to see Musk. Now, wait a second. Who's spying on Elon? Several U.S. government agencies in 2022 and 2023 tracked foreign nationals coming and going to Elon Musk's properties, according to people familiar with the matter. The investigation included the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department. It focused on people visiting the tech billionaire from countries in Eastern Europe and elsewhere who might have been trying to influence him. Until last week, Musk was one of President Trump's closest advisors. The investigation didn't progress to charges, and its current status couldn't be determined. Officials at several agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, had been briefed on it. The probe, predating the current Trump administration, highlights concerns about the number of foreign nationals in Musk's orbit. Musk runs 5 companies, including SpaceX, with sensitive government contracts and has had unprecedented access to top government officials. Let's scroll down just a little bit. Musk traveled with foreigners to such an extent that the staff of his super PAC, which he started last year to help re-elect Trump, became concerned about who was joining him at meetings and events. 2 people familiar with the group's operations said. An official at the group, called America PAC, said they had to institute extensive vetting to keep foreigners out of their efforts. 2 campaign staffers also said they were worried about Musk's coterie of foreign nationals. And so that's pretty interesting. Are they suggesting that Elon Musk was a conduit for foreign interference in our elections? Is he bought off by foreigners? Now, Steve Bannon certainly says that with some frequency and regularity on the War Room. He's been saying it for years about Elon Musk. He's been saying it in particular at the end of last week and maybe the beginning of this week, though I haven't heard it in the last couple of days. And Elon has shot back at him on Twitter, calling him repeatedly a retard. Steve Bannon is clearly not a retard. He does not fit the definition by any standard whatsoever. It is a silly insult, not because of any concerns about the word. It's just that the word has an actual meaning, and Elon Musk doesn't seem to be familiar with the meaning. I guess he just thinks it's a general pejorative. And that's unfortunate, because retard is such a great word that you don't want to just throw it around willy-nilly at people who aren't retarded. But anyhow, Elon Musk with these foreign associates, is this meant to communicate to the public that these foreign associations are potentially a negative for powerful individuals in the United States? Are they attempting to insinuate that foreign nationals were involved in funding Elon Musk's super PAC that then was involved in funding, we're told, the Donald Trump, quote unquote, campaign and his election, quote unquote, win? Campaign was fake. Election was fake. The results were already baked in. The results couldn't have been anything other than they were. There's never going to be any point where Joe Biden would have been a believable winner or Kamala would have been a believable winner. And therefore, the regime could not steal the election. At least they could not report that they had won the election. Stealing a fake election is also a silly notion. And as predicted, they filled up the down ballot races with uniparty members, state and local elections, uniparty, uniparty, uniparty. all of that set to subvert Trump, and the subversion of Donald Trump continues apace through 2025, as predicted a year before the fake election. And you can't predict something like that if elections are real. They're not real. Okay, so let us continue. Speaking of fake elections, I want to just hopefully get through this in not too much time, but there are some important bits of information from last week that we did not get to cover because we had to cover the gossip and the drama, the big drama. All right, just making sure everybody's good all around. Hello over there on YouTube. Hello on Substack. And, we're home on Rumble, so I always see what you guys are saying. This is a thread from the Oversight Project last week talking about the autopen. Speaking of fake presidents, the autopen presidency, part 3, autopen clemency while President Biden was in D.C. Why was the Biden White House autopenning boatloads of pardons and commutations while the president was in D.C.? Was he sitting in the Oval while the autopen was running the presidency? And they have recorded Biden was in town. Nonetheless, the autopen was used to sign a pardon. Why would the autopen be used if Joe Biden is right there? Why wouldn't they just bring it to Joe Biden in the Oval Office, where he never was, to sign by hand? He knows about them, doesn't he? 2/3 of the auto-penned pardons, including ones for the members of the January 6th committee, President Biden's family members, Dr. Anthony Fauci, General Mark Milley, Iranian spies, and others, occurred when President Biden was physically located in Washington, D.C. Iranian spies. Every single auto-penned commutation, including ones that removed the death sentences of nearly every inmate on federal death row, freed Iranian spies, and more, was issued while President Biden was physically present in Washington, D.C. In fact, the only auto-penned pardons that were issued when President Biden was not in Washington, D.C. were the 6 pardons issued while Biden was golfing with his family on St. Croix in St. Croix. You tell me. I don't know how that's said. I think it's Croix, but it could be Croix. The U.S. Virgin Islands, that's the important part. Given President Biden's clear cognitive decline, the frequent use of the autopen, often while he was in D.C., raises additional questions for investigators. And of course it does. Biden then, on Friday, came out to say that he had full knowledge of everything that was signed. Now, that's not proof of anything. That's just Biden saying, oh, I had it all. And I was reading an article earlier today about how there's no legal precedent for getting rid of any of this. There's not an undo button for pardons in Joe Biden's laws. But the article, mainstream as it was, noted that it seemed like Donald Trump was undoing Biden's administration. How could it be? So all of this centered around, I think that this was the most important piece of all this, the autopen drama and the rest of it. So this is from last Wednesday. This is the fact sheet from whitehouse.gov. President Donald J. Trump directs review of certain presidential actions. Today, President Trump signed a presidential memorandum directing an investigation into who ran the United States while President Biden was in office. How about that? They're investigating who's running the country while Biden, quote unquote, was in office. The memorandum directs an investigation into whether certain individuals conspired to deceive the public about Biden's mental state and unconstitutionally exercise the authorities and responsibilities of the president. And it's pretty clear that to the extent they did anything, they definitely did that. The memorandum also mandates an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Biden's purported execution of the numerous executive actions during his final years in office, examining policy documents signed with an autopen, who authorized its use, and the validity of the resulting presidential policy decisions. The combined nature of Biden's documented cognitive decline and the repeated use of an autopen raises serious concerns about the legitimacy of his actions. Reports indicate that for years, Biden suffered from serious cognitive decline. Biden's cognitive issues and apparent mental decline were reportedly even worse in private, with those closest to him attempting to conceal it from the public. This was also very clear in the report on the Biden laptop compiled by and researched by the Marco Polo research group. There were messages from Hunter Biden talking about Joe's dementia. Despite Biden's cognitive deficiencies, the White House issued over 1,200 presidential documents, appointed 235 judges to the federal bench, and issued more pardons and commutations than any administration in U.S. history. What's going to happen to those judges? What's going to happen to those pardons and commutations? What's going to happen to all those presidential documents? Of course, they're all null and void. They have to be null and void. And the people have to attest to them as null and void, because the presidency itself, to the extent that Biden ran it, was null and void. Biden did not win an election. He was not properly certified. He was not properly inaugurated, and he clearly never operated with the full authority of that office. And I would say it's most obvious with his interactions with the military. He seemed to have no military control whatsoever. Not during the pullout from Afghanistan, which was clearly botched. And there were, I would say most of that was a result of intelligence agency activity. They were not able to help Ukraine, no matter how much they said they were going to. Things like that. And it's clear, by the way, that if that regime was fully in charge of the military throughout the last 4 years, they would not be on President Trump's side the way they are at this point. And we're going to see a very public display of that on Saturday, hence the run-up, all the chaos that's being created. Let's continue with this, though. The authority to take these executive actions is constitutionally reserved for the president, yet the Biden White House used an autopen to execute the vast majority of Biden's executive actions, particularly during the second half of his presidency. President Trump believes Americans deserve answers as to whether President Biden signed these documents, and if not, who signed them and under what circumstances. Okay, so let us continue on from there. Where are we? Here we are. So a couple comments from Trump about the autopen. And I apologize that not everything today is going to be quite chronological. We're going to jump back and forth a little bit. This is Donald Trump with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz from last week.
So it's a terrible, terrible thing. Somebody said autopen. Did I hear the word autopen?
I'm just curious.
Because I think it's the biggest scandal maybe in the last 100 years in this country. So when I hear that word, I think it has to be discussed, because the fake news will try and hide it, and we can't do that. But go ahead.
Have you uncovered any evidence that anything specific was signed without President Biden's knowledge or by other people in the administration acting illegally?
Well, I don't think Biden would know whether or not he signed it.
I'm asking if you've uncovered anything.
No, but I've uncovered, the human mind. I was in a debate with the human mind, and I didn't think he knew what the hell he was doing. So, it's just one of those things, one of those problems. We can't ever allow that to happen to our country. The danger our country was in, and I know some of the people that worked with him, radical left, horrible people. And I could give you the name of some of the people that used the autopen, because I'm here. And I ask questions about people that were here also. There are a lot of people that were here when that happened, and they're here right now. And they'll answer your question very accurately. But I know some of the people that use that autopen, and those are not the people that had the same ideology as Joe Biden. These were radical left lunatics that used that, and they didn't get elected. He didn't get elected either, actually. Thank you very much, everybody.
He didn't get elected either, actually, and that clip cuts off, but Mers was a bit taken aback by that, as one would be hearing that. The members of the regime have to react in horror every time Trump suggests that Biden obviously didn't get elected and was totally illegitimate. It's very interesting that people who worked in that White House knew who was operating the autopen, and they have no problem telling Donald Trump. Now, not sure that Donald Trump needs anybody to tell him what was going on. I think, pretty good reason to believe, and we all do, that Trump has all that information. And whether it's military intelligence or it's people around Trump, whatever it is, whoever's analyzing all that information is on the Trump side of things. And there's no way that a fake administration could have run the federal government bureaucratic deep state by autopen without anyone's knowledge. The trick may have worked on the American people because whatever the TV says goes. We're still in that period now. But it certainly didn't work on Donald Trump and the people around him. And it certainly didn't work on too many of us. I mean, what can you say about that? A lot of people on our side of things, Trump's side of things, still thought Joe Biden was a real president the entire time and that everything had just been stolen. No, Joe Biden was not a real president, not from day one. At no point was he ever a real president. He was just some usurper and stand-in, the avatar and face of that deep state, that bureaucratic administrative state. One more from Trump on the autopen. If I can just find it. Here we are. This is also from that conversation with Mers.
Look, the autopen, I think, is the big scandal outside of the rigged election of 2020. I think the biggest scandal of the last many years is the autopen and who's using it. I happen to think I know, okay, because I'm here. And I'm not a big autopen person, fortunately. I'm glad. I'm very glad. It's an easy way out. But it's a very bad thing, very dangerous. You know, I sign important documents. Usually when they put documents in front of you, they're important. Even if you're signing ambassadorships, and I consider that important. I think it's inappropriate. You have somebody that's devoting 4 years of their life or more to being an ambassador. I think you really deserve, that person deserves to get a real signature, not an autopen signature. And I can tell autopen easily. I can look at it like two little pinholes from pulling the paper, right? You always see the pinholes. Yeah. It's real easy to tell about autopen. I think.
Let's pause for just a second, and then I'll come back to the rest of that. I think it's interesting that he mentioned the ambassadors here because Rahm Emanuel was the ambassador to Japan under the fake and illegitimate Biden administration. So if there's something illegitimate about the ambassador assignments because of the autopen, and Rahm Emanuel, who's being talked about as a potential presidential candidate in 2028, served as an ambassador representing the illegitimate administration of the United States as our real ambassador to Japan, that could have potentially interesting consequences, not only for Emmanuel, well, mostly for Emmanuel, but obviously if he was attempting to have a political career, especially as president in the future, that could come into play. Most of you probably understand Rahm Emanuel was chief of staff for Barack Obama. He was the mayor of Chicago. One of his brothers, Ezekiel Emanuel, is a doctor who believes that everyone should die at 75. And his other brother is Ari Emanuel, who runs William Morris Endeavor, the talent agency in Los Angeles, and a lot more than that, and is very big in the UFC. And he actually used to be Trump's agent back when Trump was on The Apprentice as well. So who knows what their relationship is now, but all of that is very interesting as far as the ambassador stuff goes. Let's get back to Trump.
I think it's very disrespectful to people when they get an autopen signature. Outside, autopen to me are used when thousands of letters come in from young people all over the country and you want to get them back. And, you know, people use autopens for that, to send a little signature at the bottom of a letter. We have thousands of them. We get thousands of letters a week. And it's not possible to, you know, do. I'd like to do it myself, but you can't do it. To me, that's where autopens start and stop. But I'm sure that he didn't know many of the things. Look, he was never for open borders. He was never for transgender for everybody. He was never for men playing in women's sports. I mean, he changed. I mean, all of these things that changed so radically. I don't think he had any idea that what was, frankly, I said it during the debate and I say it now, he didn't have much of an idea what was going on.
Mr. President,
he shouldn't be. I mean, essentially, whoever used the autopen was the president. And that is wrong. It's illegal. It's so bad. And it's so disrespectful to our country.
Hard to argue with that. Okay. Let's continue. So last week, Donald Trump also put into effect a new travel ban, and it was met with the response that you might imagine. Here is Trump announcing it from the Oval Office.
Recent terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, has underscored the extreme dangers posed to our country by the entry of foreign nationals who are not properly vetted, as well as those who come here as temporary visitors and overstay their visas. We don't want them. In the 21st century, we've seen one terror attack after another carried out by foreign visa overstayers from dangerous places all over the world. And thanks to Biden's open door policies, today there are millions and millions of these illegals who should not be in our country. In my first term, my powerful travel restrictions were one of our most successful policies, and they were a key part of preventing major foreign terror attacks on American soil. We will not let what happened in Europe happen to America. That's why on my first day back in office, I directed the Secretary of State to perform a security review of high-risk regions and make recommendations for where restrictions should be imposed. Among the national security threats their analysis considered are the large-scale presence of terrorists, failure to cooperate on visa security, inability to verify travelers' identities, inadequate record-keeping of criminal histories, and persistently high rates of illegal visa overstays, and other things. Very simply, we cannot have open migration from any country where we cannot safely and reliably vet and screen those who seek to enter the United States. That is why today I am signing a new executive order placing travel restrictions on countries including Yemen, Somalia, Haiti, Libya, and numerous others. The strength of the restrictions we're applying depends on the severity of the threat posed. The list is subject to revision based on whether material improvements are made, and likewise new countries can be added as threats emerge around the world. But we will not allow people to enter our country who wish to do us harm, and nothing will stop us from keeping America safe. Thank you very much.
All right, so let's go to the Associated Press headline from Wednesday. Trump announces travel ban and restrictions on 19 countries set to go into effect Monday, so they would be in effect now. President Trump on Wednesday resurrected a hallmark policy of his first term, announcing that citizens of 12 countries would be banned from visiting the United States, and those from 7 others would face restrictions. The ban takes effect on Monday at 12:01 a.m., a cushion that may avoid the chaos that unfolded at airports nationwide when a similar measure took effect with virtually no notice in 2017. Trump, who signaled plans for a new ban upon taking office in January, appears to be on firmer ground this time after the Supreme Court sided with him. So it turns out he was also on firm ground last time. The media just represented it entirely differently. Some, but not all, 12 countries also appeared on the list of banned countries in Trump's first term. The new ban includes Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. There will be heightened restrictions on visitors from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. And I just want to jump down here quickly to the Afghanistan part. Afghanistan was one of the largest sources of resettled refugees, with about 14,000 arrivals in a 12-month period through September 2024. Trump suspended refugee resettlement his first day in office. To include Afghanistan, a nation whose people stood alongside American service members for 20 years, is a moral disgrace. It spits in the face of our allies, our veterans, and every value we claim to uphold, said Sean Vandiver, president and board chairman of Afghan EVAC. Hashtag Afghan EVAC. Trump wrote that Afghanistan lacks a competent or cooperative central authority for issuing passports or civil documents, and it does not have the appropriate screening and vetting measures. He also cited its visa overstay rates. And we can leave the article there. We'll get to the fact check in just a second. But I want to consider different ways to think about this model, what these countries represent, and what Trump is attempting to do by restricting travel. So what we heard following the Afghanistan withdrawal, everybody remembers the last plane out of Kabul, people clutching to the wheels, and the landing gear trying to make their way out of Kabul by going up 30,000 feet in the air, just holding on. They were so desperate to leave. Meanwhile, it wasn't a real plane. People were running alongside it. The effeminate Afghan boys just waving their hands and smiling. It wasn't even the last plane out of Kabul. Planes just kept leaving. It was fake. But the part that wasn't fake, at least the part that seems less fake and potentially real, was that the regime was trying to get all of its people out of Afghanistan because the Taliban was taking back over. And we've been told for 2 decades that the Taliban is a terrorist organization, but it's actually just the people's government of Afghanistan. And one of the first things they did was shut down the black market opium trade. It's not the sort of thing our enemies do. That's the sort of thing that responsible countries do to protect their own people. We were there for 2 decades guarding the opium fields. For whom? Probably the pharma companies. We're told it was all pushed into the black market, but give me a break. Okay. So they said at the time, and you just saw it alluded to here in the Associated Press article, that a lot of people were there in Afghanistan. Is it Afghans or Afghanis? I think it's Afghans. We're helping the global regime in Afghanistan, helping the quote unquote US in Afghanistan. And they have to be taken care of. You can't just allow the Taliban to come back and then what? Like prosecute or imprison these people just because they're traitors to their country and probably violating all sorts of laws. The same would probably hold true in a number of places, one of which may well be Venezuela. We've heard Maduro talking about how Joe Biden's fake and illegitimate administration through the FBI and the DEA brought in Tren de Aragua and other illegal immigrants. I wonder if some of the upset about these immigrants being returned or barred from the country has to do with the fact that they have made promises to these people to protect them. Okay, they always promise to protect everybody. That's part of the deal. That's why people will go along with it. They'll do something corrupt because they don't think they're going to face prison, for instance. And they will help to overthrow the country if they don't think that they'll ever be held accountable. And we're probably going to deal with a very similar dynamic here in the United States. And to the extent that some of those people helping the regime are Jewish, when Trump goes after them, we are going to hear that he is rounding up the Jews. That will not be true, but we're going to hear it. And we've talked about this for a number of years. But the model is to understand that people leaving these countries may well be the people in those countries. They may well be the evil twin faction in those countries, representatives of that faction. And the reason that they need to be brought out and brought to the U.S. in particular is because there were certain deals, certain promises made, and the rest of it. Now, I have no doubt that they're also still shipping foreign slave labor over to this country and foreign combatants, which is, I think, what we're probably seeing on the ground in Los Angeles. And we'll get to some more of that. To that extent, you have to wonder if the travel ban is at least partly due to the possibility of these foreign combatants with a second summer of love seeming to be on the horizon. Let us go to the fact sheet from this travel ban. President Donald J. Trump restricts the entry of foreign nationals to protect the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats. And again, this was also from Wednesday. We're doing just a bit of catch up here. We're not going to go through this whole thing because it's kind of long. Today, President Donald J. Trump signed a proclamation to protect the nation from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats from entry into the United States. Pursuant to President Trump's executive order 14161, issued on January 20th, 2025, titled Protecting the United States from Foreign Terrorists and Other National Security and Public Safety Threats, national security agencies engaged in a robust assessment of the risk that countries posed to the United States, including regarding terrorism and national security. In Trump v. Hawaii, the Supreme Court upheld the president's authority to use Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act to protect the United States through entry restrictions. And they go through some of the countries that are excluded. The restrictions and limitations imposed by the proclamation are necessary to garner cooperation from foreign governments, enforce our immigration laws, and advance other important foreign policy, national security, and counterterrorism objectives. So it is a leverage point and a negotiation point, in addition to just the prevention of bad people arriving here. From the White House, it is the president's sacred duty to take action to ensure that those seeking to enter our country will not harm the American people. And we can leave it there. We don't, let's go down to the Afghanistan part for just 1 second to follow up on what I just said. The Taliban, a specially designated global terrorist group, controls Afghanistan. Afghanistan lacks a competent or cooperative central authority for issuing passports or civil documents, and it does not have appropriate screening and vetting measures. According to the fiscal year 2023 Department of Homeland Security Entry-Exit Overstay Report, Afghanistan had a business/tourist visa overstay rate of nearly 10% and a student, vocational, and exchange visitor visa overstay rate of nearly 30%. And so I wonder if there is some abuse of those programs, and that is what is being alluded to here. All right. Let us continue moving away from the travel ban. Or no, I apologize. Sticking with the travel ban, but away from Trump and the White House. This was one of the spokespeople for the fake and illegitimate Biden administration, Jen Psaki.
Tonight, Donald Trump decided to basically bring back one of the most controversial policies from his first term, from very early in his first term. Tonight, the president announced he's banning travel from 12 countries: Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea.
Wait a second. Is she talking about Myanmar, formerly Burma? Why are they calling it Burma again? Isn't that strange? All of a sudden, it's just Burma again. Also, controversial policy? Was it? The media created a controversy. The Supreme Court sided with Trump. If the Supreme Court says that the executive action is constitutional, not that the Supreme Court ultimately matters, but in the context of this, If they say it's fine, what's the controversy? Trump's not allowed to ban travel from other countries, even though the Supreme Court says that he can. And even though his number one priority is the safety and security of the American people, that is what he is tasked with as the commander-in-chief of the military. Strange. Let's keep going.
Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. He also partially restricted travel from 7 more countries. And all of this is an echo of the travel ban he instituted in his first term, one that sparked understandable nationwide protests and a series of court challenges. This is also exactly the kind of provocative action we have come to expect from Trump when he wants to lash out and change the subject.
So Trump is just lashing out and changing the subject. There's no other reason. Venezuela weighed in. This is, hold on, I want to try to remember his name. Diosdado Caballo. I hope I'm saying that right. What a fun name. Diosdado. Oh, man, come on. I thought I had. All right, well, we're going to. What a disaster. We're going to leave that alone. I thought I had the version with the subtitles in English and I could read it over. I blew it. Okay. One more, and then we will get into the summer of love. This was also from Wednesday. Very interesting day in terms of presidential actions on Wednesday. President Donald J. Trump restricts foreign student visas at Harvard University. Today, President Trump signed a proclamation to safeguard national security by suspending the entry of foreign nationals seeking to study or participate in exchange programs at Harvard. The proclamation suspends the entry into the United States of any new Harvard student as a non-immigrant under F, M, or J visas, and we just heard about that, and the overstay problem from Afghanistan. It directs the Secretary of State to consider revoking existing visas for current Harvard students who meet the proclamation's criteria. The proclamation does not apply to aliens attending other U.S. universities through the student exchange visa program and exempts aliens whose entry is deemed in the national interest. And they go into Harvard's extensive history concerning foreign ties and radicalism. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has long warned that foreign adversaries take advantage of easy access to American higher education to steal information, exploit research and development, and spread false information. The university has seen a drastic rise in crime in recent years while failing to discipline at least some categories of conduct violations on campus. Harvard failed to provide sufficient information to the DHS about foreign students' known illegal or dangerous activities, reporting deficient data on only 3 students. Harvard is either not fully reporting its disciplinary records for foreign students or is not seriously policing its foreign students. Harvard has also developed extensive entanglements with foreign adversaries, receiving more than $150 million from China alone. In exchange, Harvard has, among other things, hosted Chinese Communist Party paramilitary members and partnered with China-based individuals on research that could advance China's military modernization. The Chinese Communist Party has sent thousands of mid-career and senior bureaucrats to study at U.S. institutions, with Harvard University considered the top party school for the CCP, not like getting wasted at the frat house on the weekends. The top party school outside the country. So outside of China, Harvard is number 1 for the CCP. Xi Jinping's own daughter attended Harvard as an undergraduate in the early 2010s. Now, I'm not quite so worried about Xi Jinping in this. He seems like an avatar, and his daughter is being used for that purpose. And they go into, of course, the anti-Semitism, which provides a cover, if nothing else. And I know that that upsets people. I agree with you that anti-Semitism is not something that should be punished in the same way that racism is not something that should be punished. People are just allowed to have their beliefs, even if we find those beliefs somehow offensive or upsetting or any of the rest of it. All right. If you don't like racism, don't be racist. Okay. You can't install laws to make other people not racist, not only because that is a defiance of liberty and founding principles, but also because it doesn't work. So the anti-Semitism approach is probably narratively very effective, because it's going to be real tough to paint Trump as Hitler when all of the people who are, quote unquote, anti-Semitic can't stand Trump because he is fighting back against anti-Semitism. Is he doing it in any strong or restrictive way that affects your rights? No, he's not. And he's not doing the things that Israel wants him to do. So mentioning anti-Semitism in various contexts, including the one at Harvard, is probably not the concern a lot of people believe it to be. Okay, so we talked about Harvard a couple weeks ago, and that's why I think this is important. And the fact that they have this 1650 charter, they are still operating under a foreign charter. And of course, there's always the explanations about how, no, it's been incorporated in the United States and all that. They're basically a foreign adversary training ground within the United States, a global regime training ground within the United States. And now, finally, under Trump, we are seeing the global regime in all its many aspects designated as foreign adversaries. And they are foreign adversaries. So I, for one, welcome the designation. All right. So that's not too bad. We got through all of that in the first hour. I'm going to check in briefly on the chats around here. Everybody seems to be doing okay. Somebody does not agree that there are no centrists in the YouTube chat. Well, sir, I would say you are incorrect. And it's not about not liking one party or the other. There's only one party. There's a uniparty, and the Libertarian Party, I should say, not small L libertarians who have, I think, a totally unworkable and illogical ideology. But the Libertarian Party, just like the Green Party, is a controlled opposition offshoot of the main uniparty. The Libertarian Party is often used to show the country that there is this other option besides voting for the Republican. I don't know that there will be a Democrat candidate at any point who is battling the establishment in any significant way. So there would be no need to use those mechanisms against a Democrat candidate, but they've often been used against a Republican candidate. Well, 3% of the overall vote went to the Libertarian candidate, and that's what really killed Trump in the swing states. That's the explanation we've always got. So there are a couple of other parties, but it doesn't matter. There's just the uniparty, and there's anti-uniparty, and that happens to be MAGA, and MAGA happens to occupy the Republican Party, but I don't identify as a member of the Republican Party, and I would guess that many of you don't either. I have no love whatsoever for the Republican establishment, and I see the Republican establishment, the uniparty right, as every bit the enemy the uniparty left is, okay? And yes, the Republican ideology is better, and yes, the Republican policies, to the extent they're ever implemented, and they aren't, would be better, but again, they're not implemented, and the Republican establishment is not interested in implementing them. They are interested in being the Washington Generals to the Democrats' Harlem Globetrotters. The rest of us are just watching a fake contest play out purely for entertainment. And people, to the extent that they can't let go of their addiction to the soap opera and to the entertainment of it all, to the reality show that is our national politics, they're doing it for the entertainment. It's hard to see it as anything else. Their lives are now too fully invested in the soap opera, no different than all the weirdos who show up at the soap opera conventions and pay thousands of dollars to take pictures with soap stars and get their signatures on headshots. Same thing. All right. There is no centrist ideology. All right. You can take moderate points between the two sides of the controlled opposition, but you are still well within the bubble of the controlled opposition. And to go outside of the controlled opposition is never described as moderate. Okay. You might not have strong right-wing or left-wing tendencies, but you're either in the controlled opposition or you aren't. And if you want to call everybody outside of the controlled opposition a centrist, that seems like mislabeling. So if there are centrists, I don't know where they are. There are a lot of people who identify as centrists because they don't want to identify with the parties. They don't want to identify with quote unquote extremists, but really there are not centrists. I used to identify as a centrist. I get it. It was like, this is what I say to people so that they know that I don't really support that side and I don't really support that side, which means that I don't actually have to take responsibility for anything either side does. It's not me trying to do it. I have my priorities here, my priorities there, and I'm a centrist. Okay. Neither of these parties are appealing to me. It's all bullshit. Okay. It's just ideological virtue signaling because you're trying to define your position within your given social group so that you can get extra credit for your viewpoints. All right. And again, I used to be there. I used to do that. Okay. Let us continue. There are no two parties. There is only one party. Now, as an entry point into our discussion on Summer of Love number 2, let us begin here with ABC reporter Terry Moran. This is from, I think, Friday. Oh, no. Yeah, late night on Friday. So technically Saturday morning. But Terry Moran on X, formerly Twitter. The thing about Stephen Miller is not that he is the brains behind Trumpism. Yes, he is one of the people who conceptualizes the impulses of the Trump movement and translates them into policy. But that's not what's interesting about Miller. It's not brains, it's bile. Miller is a man who is richly endowed with the capacity for hatred. He's a world-class hater. You can see this just by looking at him because you can see that his hatreds are his spiritual nourishment. He eats his hate. Trump is a world-class hater, but his hatred is only a means to an end. And that end is his own glorification. That's his spiritual nourishment. Okay, so Terry Moran says Donald Trump and Stephen Miller are world-class haters. They are the definition of world-class haters. Now, included in that post is the recognition that Stephen Miller is translating the collective understanding of the movement into Trump administration policy. So, by implication, if what he's doing ends in hatred, world-class hatred, well, that must mean that the MAGA movement in general is a movement of world-class hatred, according to Terry Moran. And I don't think that Terry Moran would probably argue with that, but it's really an odd framing if you're talking about more than half the country. Okay. And if you're talking about more than half the country, and you are, and you're actually talking about probably more like 3/4 or more of the country who side with Trump and have sided with Trump for an awfully long time, or are at least siding with Trump in opposition to the alternative, to call them all haters as while representing such a small and shrinking minority seems to be a little crazy. They're not targeting you, Terry Moran, except to the extent that you're part of the fake news media, and we don't like fake news media, but it's not world-class hatred No one's out there trying to destroy your life. We're just trying to say, don't listen to that guy anymore. That guy's just lying to the public all the time. And his network, ABC, is lying to the public all the time. And there was actually a clip, I didn't pull it, but a clip from an interview last year where Donald Trump is talking to Terry Moran and tells him to his face that he is fake news. And Terry Moran looks like an insane person. I kind of wish that I had pulled that clip now, but what are you going to do? Hold for processing, actually. I'll see if it's just handy in Telegram. And if it is, I will pull it. But I'm not sure that it will be. You can play the Jeopardy music in your head while I look for this. Darn. I thought I was close. But it did not have the post I was looking for. It only had a picture, a still from that interview. All right. Well, we're just going to let it go. We're going to move on. We're going to get past it. All of us together will just continue to march forward to the best of our ability. Okay. So, world-class haters. Here is, just to reinforce the point, this clip has gone just about everywhere today. Steve Bannon was playing it over and over again on War Room this morning. This is CNN pollster Harry Enton.
Start off on the fact that immigrant citizens, immigrant voters, foreign-born voters have gone tremendously to the right on this issue in 2024 and 2025 versus where they were in 2020. Closest to or trust more in immigration. You go back to 2020. Democrats, get this, held a 32-point lead on this issue. Immigrant voters were in the Democratic camp. Jump forward to 2024, 2025. Look at that shift, a 40-point shift to the right among immigrant voters. Republicans now lead on this issue by 8 points over Democrats, more so than any other group that I could find. The group of voters who became more hawkish on immigration were, in fact, immigrants themselves, immigrants who are registered to vote in this country.
So that's on that issue. How about how they feel about kind of traditionally, historically, about Donald Trump?
Yeah. So, you see this shift and you go, what is going on underneath the hood? Well, take a look, Donald Trump. You remember when he first ran back in 2016, immigrant voters were one of his weakest spots. But look at this. Trump's vote share in presidential elections among, again, immigrant citizens, those who are registered to vote. Look at this. In 2016, he got 36% of the vote. You go to 2020, 39% of the vote. Look at this. In 2024, all the way up to 47% of the vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely losing that vote. Some polls I looked at had him barely winning that vote. Again, there is no block of voters that shifted more to the right from 2020 to 2024 than immigrant voters. And Donald Trump, at least in some surveys, actually won that vote. On average, it's about equal. So there may be all this stuff, right, about undocumented immigrants and Trump being harsh on them, but immigrant voters themselves have increasingly liked Donald Trump and have increasingly moved to the right on immigration and into the Republican camp.
Well, then on that, what you're getting at, how immigrant citizens, voters, feel about people in the country illegally.
Yeah, and this is where it all kind of comes together, Kate Baldwin. Look at this. The net favorable rating, immigrants who are here illegally, among immigrant citizens, again, those registered to vote. In 2020, look at this, plus 23 points on the net favorable rating. But look at where we were in 2024, minus 6 points, underwater. So immigrant citizens have become increasingly unfavorable in their views of those immigrants who are here illegally. So I think it's so important when we're talking about this debate from a political angle to separate those out who are undocumented immigrants versus those who are here legally and those who are citizens and those who are voters, because that group of voters has felt increasingly distant from those immigrants who are here legally. And so again, when we're talking about this, at least from a political angle, this is why Donald Trump feels so comfortable, because in fact, amongst the group that you would think that would be most opposed to this, in fact, they become increasingly favorable, not just towards Donald Trump, but towards a Republican point of view on immigration and becoming distant from those immigrants who are here illegal.
Now that is a lot of hand motion, but immigrants in the United States are shifting to the quote unquote right, which means shifting toward Trump, faster than any other group. 40% swing, 30% swing on these various questions, immigrants themselves don't want illegal immigrants in the United States. So are they world-class haters? Because, we're world-class haters. And Stephen Miller, of course, is a world-class hater, serving a world-class hater and implementing world-class hateful policies that just so happen to be the policies that the vast majority of the country supports and supported last year, not just in the fake election with all of these, quote unquote, votes that he's analyzing, but also just in reality that the rest of us can observe in our own lives. Okay. Forget about elections and fake votes. Forget about fake news polls. Harry Enton is leading a certain narrative. And, you could question why the mainstream media is promoting these particular understandings of each other, right? They're basically selling us ideas about our fellow Americans and the people who occupy this country with us. You can argue about why they're doing that, but fake votes, fake news polls, irrelevant. We know from operating in our own lives that people have become very comfortable with the things that Donald Trump is doing, most especially when it comes to immigration, which all of a sudden out of nowhere, when we were trying to get the unipartisan compromise on immigration a year and a half ago, all of a sudden, all the mainstream media was covering immigration as the problem that it is. And now we are seeing the culmination of all of that. So let us go to this post. We'll start here. This post from the White House last night. Hold momentarily for processing. Here we are. Oh, look at that. It's Cory Booker to start.
The reality is we see peaceful protests launching in Los Angeles.
Get your hands off these poor people. They're just trying to live their lives, man. Trying to live their lives.
The vast majority of protesters and demonstrators are peaceful.
Turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn.
They're saying that they have it under control.
Things are under control. Peaceful protests are taking place.
The reality.
Yep. So that's quite a video. If you are only listening, obviously you could probably gather that the video being played behind that sound is of the chaos and destruction from over the weekend in my former home city of Los Angeles. I lived there for nearly 19 years. Now, the areas that were most affected yesterday and the day before, I think that they had some that were in not the main part of downtown, but just east of there. Prior to that, they had them in Paramount, California, which is kind of South Los Angeles. They used to call that South Central. I think Paramount would count as far as that's concerned. It's part of Los Angeles County, but as I mentioned on DPH the other night, it's not part of the Los Angeles city proper. So that's kind of interesting when you're thinking about whose responsibility it is to tamp down that kind of chaos. But once again, we have mainstream politicians who were quoted on little quotes appearing on the screen. You heard some of them talking, but politicians and media saying, well, these protests are mostly peaceful, just like we saw in 2020. And what they're trying to do is say, well, if there's 100 people at the protest, 90 of them or 80 of them or 70 of them, well, they're just there peacefully protesting. And yes, the other 30% or 20% or 10% are just wreaking havoc all over the city. But because of the ratio, that means that the protests are mostly peaceful. That is a very technical, legalistic approach. I wonder who thought that up to attempting to tell the truth of that situation. I mean, they're obviously not telling the truth of that situation. If all of the protests have a violent element as part of them, then they aren't mostly peaceful. They're not peaceful protests at all. Okay. And the point's not peaceful protest. The point is the violence and the chaos, because they're trying to get their message across, just like we saw in 2020 during the Summer of Love. And they did it all over the country. Now, if you want to say that all of this is a well-organized info op, I would totally agree with you. And then the question becomes, is it coming from one side or the other? Because we can look at the footage. The footage often seems professionally shot. We'll get into some of the people who shoot this footage in a little bit, but not only professionally shot, but professionally staged. They'll take over entire intersections. No one will stop them. They were burning Waymo cars, the driverless cars that have the big weird 360 camera thing on top of them. I think that's what that is, at least. And I guess Waymo had to flee the city. The city's no longer safe for driverless automobiles, but they paint graffiti all over them. They wreck the cars. They set them on fire. And all of that is supposed to be peaceful protest or staged anarchy. It's one of the two. And at some point, it doesn't actually matter which side is orchestrating it. I can't imagine that all of that style of violence is being orchestrated somehow from the Trump side. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We always have to leave open whatever possibilities, can't be ruled out. So we can't rule it out. Maybe there's some kind of Trump-aligned organization right now that has divergent interests that we will see split off somewhere down the path, responsible for staging all of this. But it is being staged, and it is being funded, and it is being organized. There's no question about that. This is some of the footage from Sunday in Los Angeles. That, to me, looks very staged. What a scene they have created. And all of this, by the way, is ostensibly to protest ICE raids, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, raids on the workers, the day laborers who wait outside the Home Depot in the morning, hoping that construction crews, people who need help with moving or some other manual labor project will come pick them up, hire them for $20 an hour or whatever it is that they ask for, and take them off to go work jobs. You need some laborers. You go down to Home Depot. You say, "Hey guys, jump in the back of the truck. We're going to move this, or we're going to this building site, or whatever. Are you a builder? Are you good at this or good at that?" That's how it works. It's crazy. I always thought it was the strangest thing in Los Angeles when you would go to a Home Depot in the morning and there would be just 30 guys out there waiting for work. There's got to be a reason for it. It's got to be because it works. Let's continue. So the protests were ostensibly against that. We're going to get into some of the more direct causes later on. All of this is so that illegal aliens aren't deported, so that the federal government cannot deport illegal aliens. Now, I'm totally fine if we don't have a federal government. I would like for there to be no federal government. The states can operate as states. That would be, I think, better to fragment and relocalize. But to the extent that we are going to have a federal government, it has to be to protect the states in a holistic sort of way, protect the whole country. And unfortunately, we're now at the point where the government is forced into this crazy situation where protecting the country is against the interests of the people running the states and the cities. That's not a point we should ever want to be at in this country. And so that part of it is very bad. But remember what is being protested the entire time and who's actually doing it. Are these foreign combatants? This is every bit a color revolution, just like we saw in 2020, just like we've seen all over the world. We don't need to think of it as something else, even if it's all fake. And it may well all be fake. And as always, I wish that I did not have to clarify this every time, but apparently I do. I'm not suggesting that rocks did not go through the windows of police vehicles. Okay. We saw that on the video. I have no reason to believe that's not true. I have seen chaos and mayhem in Los Angeles before. It looks like they shut down a freeway the other day, which is extremely dangerous, not only for the people on the freeway, but for the city in general. Shuts down the economy, shuts down people's ability to travel and go on about their lives. It's taking away their right of movement, and you could say assembly as well. And to the extent that people have to get to hospitals to have babies, or because they're injured in an emergency situation or whatever else, well, you're putting those people in a direct threat of harm. And honestly, it's just disgusting. That's not peaceful protest. They call it peaceful because the protesters aren't being directly violent, but what they are doing is a disruption of the peace. And here is one of those intersections I was talking about. Now we'll notice right here and in these next couple of clips that all of these videos are watermarked with a BG on the scene. While I was doing hindsight 2020, this is something that I noticed pretty frequently because we were looking back at that 2020 footage, and somehow this guy's named Brendan Gutenschwager or something like that. He is at all of these events from the first moment they're happening till the moment they end. He is at all of these things, taking footage just like this. Is it part of an info op? Really hard to see how it's not directly part of an info op. And to the extent that these events are staged, this guy could be on a call sheet for all we know. Okay. And call sheets are what they send out to everybody involved in a film or TV production. It says when the actors are supposed to arrive, when the crew's supposed to arrive. And so everybody involved in the production reads the call sheet and understands what their role is, when they're meant to get there, what scenes are going to be shot throughout the day, etc. I'd be surprised if they don't have call sheets for this kind of thing, and if BG on the scene wasn't part of it. But let's view some of the footage. And again, notice the cameraman here, this one who's behind the car right now, for instance, fully masked, and we'll see that in a number of these videos. Now, I guess the purpose of this is to show that they own these streets or something. They say things like that fairly often. So donuts in the middle of the intersection, they just take over. I've actually seen that before in Austin, Texas. I'm not sure if I remember seeing it in Los Angeles, but where are the police? Is that a disruption of the peace? It clearly is. Okay. No one who is just going on about their lives, even if they are upset with the government, has the right to behave that way in the middle of the day in a major urban center. Okay. That's not peaceful protest. That's doing something hazardous in the middle of the city. And I believe it's probably illegal. So they're breaking the law in addition. Let's continue. More from Brendan Gutenschwager or Schwager. They are chanting peaceful protest. And for those of you listening on audio, there are some guys dressed up like policemen with their riot helmets and their nightsticks in hand. Then you have men in military fatigues holding riot shields that say in massive lettering, California National Guard across them, and they are backing these people up while all sorts of cameramen are filming this. Again, it looks like a staged scene. Masks, 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 everywhere masks. Why are all these people wearing masks? Trump is actually speaking out against the masks as well. We're going to get into some of his statements over the last few days in just a couple of minutes. A couple more clips from BG on the scene, who is just amazingly on every scene. How does he get on so many scenes? Protesters on Figueroa Street downtown. This is like right next to the Staples Center, basically. Mexican flags everywhere. That looks like a El Salvador flag down there. Some handmade signs, some professionally printed signs. Let's keep going with another one from BG on the scene. So whose streets, our streets, the people united will never be divided. That is what they are chanting. Now, none of these protests are very big, just to make that perfectly clear. In 2020, during the George Floyd riots and the whole Black Lives Matter bullshit that we watched in the early stages of the post-George Floyd period, there were actually a lot of people at those. Okay, I can attest to my experience in Los Angeles during the Summer of Love. There were a lot of people I knew going down and taking part in those protests because they all thought that they were just standing up for liking everybody. That's a really important thing there, to be understood as a person who basically likes everybody. Oh, you're a very kind person. Kindness is very important. And not being racist is very important. And the way to show everybody that you're kind and not racist is to show up for these communist events. Okay. But at least back then, there were a lot of people. There's not a lot of people at these events. It looks like a mass of people moving down the street. But if there's 100 or 200 or 300, that's not a lot of people. Okay. We're in one of the biggest urban environments in the world, and they've got a few hundred people, many of them part of the AstroTurf campaign to create these sort of protest events and make them look like they are actual ground roots people's movements, or grassroots, I should say, people's movements, but they're not. So any elements, and this is maybe a good time to mention this, we've talked about this a number of times before. The fact that there are organic elements layered onto these AstroTurfed staged events, well-funded events, well-organized events, does not make the events grassroots, okay? The entire point of getting those organic elements added, the reason they broadcast and advertise these things so profusely, is because they want those organic elements. They want people to add themselves to the event that is already occurring. Okay. It's well funded. It's well organized, totally staged. And then organic elements layer on top of the fake elements. And then people have the tendency to believe, oh, this is a real event because of these organic elements. No, the organic elements are fooled into believing the fake event is real. And so then they add on to it because they think that their presence will somehow be helpful. But their presence is not helpful in terms of any sort of policy goal or agenda. Their presence is only helpful in advertising the movement as more broadly appealing than it is. These movements don't appeal to anyone. And even people who support, ostensibly, again, the immigration viewpoint that's being expressed here, don't want to see the rest of the protest thing because it makes them look bad, right? Even among the party of false decorum, to argue in favor of these kinds of events becomes quickly precarious, okay? The more this video gets shown to the country, the less social credit you can acquire by saying that you support these events. Supporting these events is not a good thing. Let's continue. So this is a little compilation video of the claims about how these are peaceful protests.
The reality is we see peaceful protests launching in Los Angeles.
We are having an administration that's targeting peaceful protests, people that are there to protest.
Most of those demonstrators were very peaceful.
Want them to exercise their fundamental rights.
Smashing cars.
The First Amendment right gives you the ability, again, to protest peacefully.
Police, SUVs on fire.
And if they're escalating their tactics, then so are we.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
When they show up, we gotta show up even stronger.
See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
I think that was from the Dilly meme team, and they always do a fantastic job. I've pointed them out a number of times. And so then you, at the end of that, you had the now famous image of that shirtless but masked man on top of one of those Waymos waving a flag. And this is supposed to be the symbol of the resistance to Donald Trump. Is that an attractive symbol? Now, we might still have shell shock from back in 2020, where this sort of thing seemed to work and to benefit the regime and its supporters. It's not going to work this time. It's already not working. Let us continue. Here is a little more of the peaceful protest.
Holy cow, they're throwing bricks at the police. Holy cow, they're throwing bricks at the
Throwing bricks at the police through the back windows, whatever. Now, assuming that that is not a completely staged stunt, and it might be, that's clearly quite violent, okay? It doesn't matter if you think that ICE shouldn't be deporting illegal aliens. You're not allowed to then attack police with bricks. And of course, we've seen the pallets of bricks. And as Donald Trump has mentioned a number of times now, the protesters, quote unquote, with the sledgehammers or picks or whatever they're going after the sidewalks with, ripping up these big stones from the sidewalks and then using them as projectiles to hurl at law enforcement. Got a couple of more here. Yeah, but just this one, and then we'll move on from some of these violent scenes. So, cinder blocks flying off an overpass, smashing through cop cars lined up on the freeway right below. Now, why would cop cars stop right below an overpass? Okay. To me, that just screams this is all bullshit. But maybe there was a good reason for them to stop right there and then leave their cars to be absolutely demolished by these protesters. Maybe they just say, okay, well, these are the cars that we're going to let you destroy. Destroy these ones, set them on fire, take your little pictures, and then we'll move on. Even if that's the case, if that is the case, I should say, that is even more staged than we thought about before. And to think about the regime and what their motivations might be in a situation like that, why would you stage that kind of violence if you are the regime? Are you trying to show the country that this is what could happen again if the Trump administration keeps pursuing these policies? Perhaps. It's hard to think of what the practical purpose would be, especially right now. I don't think there's a major appetite for this. This is Maxine Waters addressing reporters in a congressional press conference from today.
And even those who were out of step with what we are advocating, peaceful protest, did not create any violence. Nobody was shot. Nobody was killed. Get it in your head. And so when martial law is called, what are you going to say? I missed the point. Don't miss the point, you all. Don't think that somehow, because they called out the National Guard, there was violence. There was no violence. I was on the street. I know. And I went from downtown detention back out into the community, talking to people what happened in Paramount, what happened in Compton, what happened in Inglewood. So, first of all, get it straight. And don't just rely on what you're being told or the few incidents that you saw.
So, a lot in there. Okay. First of all, she's saying there's no violence. Unless all of that was staged by the other side, then there was definitely violence. I don't think anybody in the country is going to believe her when she says that. But what she mentioned right there is martial law. And she's trying to say, get it in your head that when martial law is called, it's not going to be about this violence, because this is not violence. There are peaceful protests, and what you're seeing on TV is something else. Now, she didn't make that case very eloquently. If she had, maybe it would be more worth listening to. And if she was someone other than Maxine Waters, who's one of the most corrupt communists in this country, it might be easier to take that seriously. It's also Maxine Waters who encouraged everybody to go out and get up in their faces, basically harass members of the Trump administration in person to make them stop doing what they were doing back in the first term. But the martial law piece of it is quite interesting, because it seems like we might be reaching that stage where the military will be called out to places all across the country. Many people think it might be 12 cities. Could be. I have a feeling it's probably going to be a lot more than that. And we'll see why in a little bit. But are we at that point? Is there an acceptable point for martial law where the American people reach the conclusion that martial law is in fact what is needed? It's not, it's gone from being a threat to now a necessity. I would suggest that we are probably arriving at that point. And when we reach that point, it immediately becomes a problem that we would be having some sort of military government. We've talked about this a number of times. I would suggest to you that we have been under some form of military government for at least the last 4.5 years, but probably much longer. I should say probably longer and potentially much longer. If you told me we've been under military law for decades, I would say, okay, I can probably see how that makes sense. I'm not sure it's that long. I'm just saying I believe that there's at least some possibility. But if we're right about devolution or something else happening in the background and the military remaining detached from the fake and illegitimate Biden administration, which I think is pretty easy to see, then we've already been under some form of military government. Okay. If the supposed president is not allowed to exercise the authority of his office because the military will not go along with it, well, then the military actually has more authority than that president, quote unquote, which would mean we're already under military government. And the president, quote unquote, and his fake and illegitimate administration, the bureaucratic administrative deep state, would have been subservient to the military. So we would already be under some form of military government. That military is now aligned with Donald Trump. Seems to be, which would mean we're now under Trump's government with the backing of the military, which would be the same as it was before, except now Trump is publicly recognized as the president and the leader of all this, though he may just be a face or an avatar of that military project. Okay, that's why I talked about Trump being publicly recognized as president again for the last 4.5 years, rather than talking about Biden as the president. Biden was never the president. Okay, so something else has been going on the entire time, and it involves the military. It necessarily has to. Okay, if the military was on Biden's side, none of the rest of that could have happened. And it's not, because at the end of the day, the military represents actual power, not the abstract power of positions, elections, constitutions, the rest of it. All of that is rules on paper. And the people can follow those rules and thus make them real, but it's really still only in the abstraction that it matters. The military represents real power. Therefore, the leader with the military behind him is the only real leader, which is what we see in Venezuela. No matter how many times they try to tell us that there's some other government or that Juan Guaido is the president. Trump even told us that as part of what I believe to be the orchestration of the public communication about what's happening in Venezuela. They try to suggest that a different leader leads the country of Poland. And we just talked about Poland's elections within the past few weeks. Donald Tusk is not the leader of Poland. Donald Tusk does not control the military. Okay. It is impossible to get rid of Donald Trump as president, no matter what coup or color revolution or impeachment or the rest of it they are able to pull, without the backing of that military. Okay. Now, we can hope that the military is upholding their oaths to the Constitution, which would require them to back Trump, most particularly after the fake 2020 election. And it would ultimately require them to be on the side of the American people. So if the military is on the side of Trump and the American people, then all of this stuff that they're doing is a distraction. It is an attempt to win public sentiment over to their side so that the public will voice their concerns. And through that, we will have a halting of the forwarding of Trump's agenda and the removal of these illegal aliens from the country. All right, so let's get to one more clip from that congressional press conference today. And this is the Speaker Emerita, Nancy Pelosi, the woman who they still pretend is Speaker of their government.
And I say this as a former party chair. When there is a gathering, a large gathering of people, the anarchists see it as an opportunity and they move in. So always have to be careful whether you see a burned car or broken window or whatever it is. It may be the exuberance of the moment, but it may be the anarchist setting in. I heard one of the former police chiefs of Los Angeles speak about this on Sunday.
She sounds tired or drunk, but she's suggesting that this is just a sign of the anarchists moving in. The anarchists are moving in. Well, how do you distinguish between those masked protesters and the violent anarchists? They're part of the same thing. Unless all of those anarchists are being sent in by the other side to make their very peaceful protests look bad, it's pretty clear what's going on. And because all the organizations behind these protests have a history of exactly that, and all the media figures and the politicians have a history of calling for violence, justifying the violence, pretending the violence doesn't happen, bailing the violent criminals out of prison, the prosecutors not prosecuting them in the first place, It's really hard to see how the violence could be coming from anywhere else. They're the people who support it. It's their regime, their agenda, their playbook that calls for that exact activity in color revolutions all over the world. And it's happened here as well. And there's no doubt that they organized at least some of the chaos on J6 as well. These things happen all over the world over and over again. The same people orchestrating them, the same people benefiting from them, the same causes being promoted each and every time. Okay. And the playbook will change based on the circumstances. In 2020, it was Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. Now it's saving illegal aliens. Now, I think the Black Lives Matter movement was bullshit, and Black Lives Matter, Antifa are domestic terrorist organizations and part of a color revolution. But at least there are Black Americans that all Americans care about. Okay. That at least is a real cause. This is illegal aliens. And we can, again, of course, be compassionate to people as they are moved out of the country. Okay. And we can follow the law and we can be good people about it. But there's no public sentiment that's like, oh, yeah, there's one group of people we have to protect. It's illegal aliens. And it turns out that there's 1 million plus undocumented immigrants, AKA illegal aliens, in Los Angeles, 1 million of them. And the people of LA, not the people of LA, the politicians in LA, the politicians in California, all of whom are the product of fake elections, don't want those people moved out. And they say, when they are trying to make excuses to justify that position, they say that they have concerns about the work of California and the work of Los Angeles being done without those immigrant populations because they are so enmeshed in society at that point. And that's only the undocumented illegals, because there are, I don't know how many, but probably hundreds of thousands of children of undocumented illegal aliens who, by virtue of birthright citizenship, which is probably going to go away in a couple of weeks, which might go away in a couple of weeks, I should say. I don't want to jump the gun here. It just seems like there's a confluence of events that would indicate they know what's coming, and what's coming is the end of birthright citizenship, which would mean that all those children of undocumented illegal aliens are not actually American citizens. And so that increases the number of undocumented immigrants in a major way. I would not be the least bit surprised to find out that there are hundreds of thousands of more illegal aliens by that standard just in Los Angeles alone, and probably millions upon millions across the country. And I think that that's going to be a very important aspect of how this is all going to wind up. And again, it's worth remembering that the Supreme Court decisions come out by the end of June. And so these next 3 weeks, we're going to be seeing a number of major decisions coming down. So this could all be to get a jump start on that as well. But yeah, one last thing about that. So they have these million illegal aliens, and we're supposed to understand that these are providing critical labor in our communities. Are they voting? Are their identities being used to cast fake votes to substantiate the fake vote totals that are reported, and those ballots are then entered into the system in any number of days or weeks after the election that they continue to count ballots? And in California, they don't care at all. Okay. It's really important to understand that Gavin Newsom faced a recall, and in 2021, that recall election was held. And before the polls even closed, they announced that Gavin had been voted back into office with like a 2/3 majority, 2/3 to, 34% or whatever it was, that Gavin should still be governor. I lived in California in 2020 and early 2021, and obviously for many years before that. But I observed this stuff directly. I worked on getting Gavin Newsom recalled. Okay. There wasn't massive support for Gavin Newsom. And there weren't the number of votes that possibly came in. I think it was like just a few million fewer votes than in the presidential election the year before. And they never get that kind of turnout in midterms, but they had it for Gavin, and they had it all immediately so quickly that they were able to announce Gavin as the winner. And then you'll remember in 2022, Karen Bass, I think it was 22, went up against Rick. Why can't I think of his name? I was about to call him Rick Santorum. Rick Caruso, sorry. Rick Caruso, the man who is probably being positioned as the next California governor, the real estate guy. He has a law school named after him at Pepperdine. He has a medical center at USC named after him. He was the former water commissioner. We talked about Rick Caruso back during the fires. And on DPH the other night, we talked about the Donald Trump clips where he discusses those fires. I might as well just pull this up. I haven't talked about it on this podcast in a while, although we did talk about it right at the beginning when Trump said that he attacked California and stared right at the camera while doing it. And I would suggest that everyone pay some mind to what he might mean here.
And now look at that way it looked. It wasn't easy. We had to be very unfriendly to get into those areas. We opened it up.
Mr. President.
I essentially attacked California. Can you believe it? I attacked California. Let's go.
I attacked California, he says. Where does he look into the... There he is. Just staring right into the camera.
Mr. President.
I essentially attacked.
How about that pause and that stare before he says it? We'll do it one more time.
Those areas, we opened it up.
Mr. President.
I essentially attacked California. Can you believe?
So that's one. Here's another.
Getting late. They're going to run out of forests the way they're going. What a shame. And by the way, the water is flowing in California. I hope you people have seen it. But the water is flowing. Do you have a picture of that? I'd hold it up. Do you have a picture of that? Get a picture of it, please. You know, we had a little skirmish in California. I can't believe we had to do that, but we opened up the water in California.
A skirmish in California, but they opened up the water. Here's one more. This is Donald Trump with Mark Rutte.
It seems to be that's where they're heading. And we'll have to take care of something to do with Los Angeles. A place called Los Angeles almost burned to the ground. By the way, I broke into Los Angeles. Can you believe it? I had a break-in. I invaded Los Angeles, and we opened up the water. And the water is now flowing down. They have so much water, they don't know what to do. They were sending it out to the Pacific for environmental reasons. Okay, can you believe it?
So he invaded Los Angeles. There was a skirmish. He attacked California. I'm not saying that. He said it. Okay. What does he mean? That's the question. And talking about military government earlier, what is the military for? Why do we have a defense department? Okay. It's for national defense. It's not so that we can go waging war all around the world to overthrow countries on behalf of the global regime and its bankers and neoconservatism worldwide. It's so that we can defend this country. Okay, they talk about Posse Comitatus and the rest of it. All that is garbage. Posse Comitatus was after the Civil War. After the regime took over again, they need to put these things in place and then use them when it benefits them and violate them when it doesn't benefit them. Okay? Donald Trump's responsibility is to protect this country. And does that mean that some of what we see in this country could be kinetic acts of war against the global regime that has infiltrated and embedded itself in this country? We have good twin, evil twin factions in every country, including this one. So if our war worldwide is against that evil twin faction, can they be attacked in the United States? The answer has to be yes. Okay. I wish there was a different way around that, but there's not a different way around that. That's the situation we find ourselves in. And if there's a path where all the rules are just followed so perfectly and we can vote our way out of it, etc., then wonderful. And I'll be more than happy to admit I'm wrong, because we will be in a much more stable state. And I would like that. Okay. But I don't think that's the case, which means that it is a necessity to wage some form of war in the United States. And I would also suggest that incidents like the train in East Palestine, Ohio, and maybe some of the fires at different food processing centers and the rest of it are kinetic acts of war in the United States. I would suggest that some of the fires in California are kinetic acts of war in the United States, and also events to pull federal funding, to declare a state of emergency, and then to receive federal funds to fill California's coffers because of the fiscal irresponsibility there, the pensions and the pension debts blossoming out of control. Okay. So is it possible that the LA fires were acts of kinetic warfare? I believe that it is possible. And I know that that makes people extremely uncomfortable, and I totally understand why. But I also want to show a couple more videos of California and some pictures of what was going on in California. Now, the fires were in early January, I think like the 7th through the 10th or something along those lines. A friend of mine drove through the Palisades and sent me these pictures and videos at the end of February, 6 weeks after the fires. Okay. And what do we have here? We have, this is a drive through the Palisades. Still quite smoky for 6 weeks later. And that's not just Los Angeles smog you're seeing. And I think you kind of get the picture. Here are just a couple more still images, and then we can move on. A military police Humvee on the ground in the Palisades. There were checkpoints, by the way, to make sure that people were residents or had some other reasonable explanation for why they needed to be there, because otherwise it was cut off. But military police vehicles on the streets of the Pacific Palisades. This is obviously in a different location. You can see by the blue sky here. What's all that doing in Los Angeles? Why is smoke still rising from the ground 6 weeks later? I don't know the answers, but I have a feeling that there was a lot more going on in Southern California than we were told by the television. And, you know, the people who said that it was all about climate change causing these fires. Fires were in 3 locations primarily, well removed from one another by like 30 miles difference. Fires don't jump 30 miles. And one house would be burnt down. One house would be just fine. One house would be burnt down. Trump even said in the, I wish I could remember the exact wording, because then I could find it with the transcript. But in his press conference with Karen Bass after those fires, Trump talked about how the fires seemed like they were really smart in how they were targeting. Just saying. So do we have kinetic warfare being waged in the United States? I would suggest that the answer is yes. And to that extent, I would suggest that the military being present here, if they are going after this evil twin faction, and I believe they are, it's probably a necessity. Another thing to remember that we've talked about a number of times is what a civil war actually is. Okay. That's the global regime and its organs within a country waging war on the people of that country who are resisting the implementation of the global regime agenda. And because that is always a small minority and doesn't include the military in different situations, as this situation seems to be, then what they're doing is bringing in foreign enemy combatants, which would explain the criminals and the drug dealers and the murderers and the rapists, etc. Military-aged men flooding through our borders. Okay. Now, there's a scary element to that. And I don't think that, I'm very hopeful that, and I don't think that that element is going to become present in our lives in any widespread way. I can't say it's not going to happen anywhere. It might happen somewhere. Some of these states are controlled by illegitimate communist governors, and the cities controlled by illegitimate communist mayors. That's a problem. Now, to the extent that the elections are controlled, I believe they are, you don't know who's putting a Gavin Newsom or a Karen Bass in place, right? So all of these are factors, and we're just going to have to see how things play out. But there could already be enemy combatants in this country. And so then a lot of patriots who want to protect the country would think to themselves, well, it doesn't seem like anybody's going to actually protect the country. And they didn't in 2020. Trump did a little bit, but not enough. We still ended up with an entire summer of love. We ended up with police precincts in Minneapolis being burnt down and taken over in Seattle, an entire part of Seattle taken over by these commies, an entire part of North Carolina, I think it was, being taken over by those commies. So people are going to want to go out and protect their communities. And then you get into the real problems, because then it looks like there is civil war being waged by both sides. And so I would tell people to be particularly watchful for Fed posting and glowies in the chat, etc. Anybody who's like, we need to get out there and start killing these people. Like, give me a break, okay? They're trying to drum up the idea that there is going to be a civil war. Donald Trump seems prepared and willing to do what's necessary to make sure we don't have a repeat of 2020. And so I think it's probably wise for people to stay out of that and to not go attempt to deal with this communist violence with a violent response, because that has extremely negative potential, not only in reality, but also in whatever narratives we're talking about into the future. The last thing you want to do is create more incentive for people who are being put off by this protest to get back on, quote unquote, protest, to get back on their side and add themselves as real organic elements to these staged, funded, orchestrated psyops and psy-acts that we are dealing with. Let me pause for a second and take a look at the chat. I know there was a Rumble rant I missed over on Rumble. Lynn Yoda, $20. My painter has a permanent green card and working towards citizenship. His company employs 2 crews. He wants illegal criminals and illegal freeloaders out. Didn't press on those working for a better life. Yeah, well, I can imagine that a lot of them do want illegals out, because to the extent that they are here working legally, they are probably here filling, as you just noted, many of those hard labor or manual labor or even service industry positions that the illegals would be brought in to fill. So they would actually be taking their jobs, just like they're taking the jobs of Native American citizens. And I don't mean quote unquote Native American. I mean actual Native Americans. And that used to be a thing. That didn't mean American Indians. Gavin Newsom on X, formerly Twitter. This is from Sunday. Every single Democrat governor agrees Donald Trump's attempts to militarize California are an alarming abuse of power. So this is a statement from Democratic governors on Donald Trump's use of California's National Guard. And he lists all of the Democrat governors, as well as the the chair and the vice chair of the Democrat Governors Association. The joint statement reads, President Trump's move to deploy California's National Guard is an alarming abuse of power. Governors are the commanders-in-chief of their National Guard, and the federal government activating them in their own borders without consulting or working with a state's governor is ineffective and dangerous. Further, threatening to send the U.S. Marines into American neighborhoods undermines the mission of our service members, erodes public trust, and shows the Trump administration does not trust local law enforcement. And, you know, Donald Trump has been a very big supporter of the police, and many police organizations and police unions have supported Donald Trump. But why would you just trust local law enforcement? That would be a silly standard, okay? It's okay not to trust local law enforcement. It's okay for people not to trust local law enforcement, and it's certainly okay for the president, who has information better than we can dream of, it's okay for him not to trust local law enforcement. It's important we respect the executive authority of our country's governors to manage their National Guards, and we stand with Governor Newsom, who has made it clear that violence is unacceptable and that local authorities should be able to do their jobs without the chaos of this federal interference and intimidation. So the idea here is that the federal forces are creating the chaos. Without them, it would not be chaos. And it sounds like they are, we're going to get into some of the legality of all this in a little bit, but it sounds like they are concerned that this is going to become more widespread, that other Democrat governors will have national troops, federal troops, sent in to deal with the problems they choose not to deal with. This is Northcom from Sunday. Here we are. U.S. Northcom statement regarding protection of federal property and personnel in the Los Angeles area. So U.S. Northern Command. By direction of Secretary of Defense and in coordination with the U.S. Northern Command, approximately 2,000 California Army National Guard soldiers have been placed under federal command and control in a Title X status to support the protection of federal personnel and federal property in the greater Los Angeles area. As U.S. Northcom's Land Component Command, U.S. Army North stood up Task Force 51 with a 2-star general as the ground command and control element over the Title X forces. At this time, there are approximately 300 members of the California Army National Guard's 79th Infantry Brigade combat team deployed at the following locations in the greater LA area: Los Angeles, Paramount, and Compton, California. Additionally, approximately 500 Marines from 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines at 29 Palms, California, are in a prepared to deploy status should they be necessary to augment and support the DoD's protection of federal property and personnel efforts. U.S. Northcom will provide more information as units are identified and deployed. So the military is being sent in. And again, it's worth mentioning that we need this approach, this very legalistic approach, doing things, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, making sure that all of this stuff is done in accordance with the laws as they stand now. Okay? Even if we're already in a military government, even if, regardless of the laws, they would have to do these things in order to protect the country. Trump has said, he who saves his country violates no law, hearkening back to Napoleon. And I think that we can all agree that we are at the point where that is necessary. The Constitution has been inverted. It's been inverted for our entire lives. It's been inverted for 160 years, and it was chipped away before that. And it's possible, at least, that the Constitution in 1789 was already a chipping away of the sovereignty of America, its states, and its people. Okay? So the Constitution's protections for us, that would be the impetus for us to suggest that everything must be done according to the Constitution, are already not in place. Okay? And if we want to be dealt with like adults, if we want to be told the truth by people in power, well, then we need to understand for ourselves what that truth might be and wrap our heads around. Okay? Otherwise, we're just going to be getting psyops forever and opt out, right? I don't want psyops forever. Now, maybe all there is of reality is psyops forever, and one psyop is battling another psyop. Okay? But that kind of seems like one group of Freemasons battling the other group of Freemasons. But that kind of seems to itself exist within some controlled opposition dynamic. And there are choices outside that, which are probably only living a godly life. It would be good, though, if we could get outside of the psyop versus psyop nonstop paradigm that we find ourselves in. Kamala Harris, for whatever reason, probably the reason is that she wants to be the next governor of California, but former quote unquote senator of California and former fake presidential candidate with in the fake campaign of 2024. She said, "Los Angeles is my home, and like so many Americans, I'm appalled at what we are witnessing on the streets of our city. Deploying the National Guard is a dangerous escalation meant to provoke chaos." Wait a second. Like so many Americans, I'm appalled at what we are witnessing on the streets of our city. What are Americans appalled about? Most Americans are appalled about the violence that's being broadcast on the streets of that city, and not that the National Guard is there. She continues, in addition to the recent ICE raids in Southern California and across our nation, it is part of the Trump administration's cruel, calculated agenda to spread panic and division. Panic is a key word. Are you panicking? I'm not panicking. This administration's actions are not about public safety. They're about stoking fear. Fear of a community demanding dignity and due process. No. No one is worried about that. It's not about stoking fear. It's about maintaining safe communities, which is why we want them not only in California, but anywhere necessary all around the country. Because I believe, and I would gather that you probably believe, that the evil twin faction has plotted out and prepared for widespread violence and disruption across the country in the death throes of the regime's grip on control in this country. Protest is a powerful tool, Kamala says, essential in the fight for justice. And as the LAPD mayor and governor have noted, demonstrations in defense of our immigrant neighbors have been overwhelmingly peaceful. I continue to support the millions of Americans who are standing up to protect our most fundamental rights and freedoms. That is not what they are doing. And illegal aliens do not have fundamental rights and freedoms in this country. They are here illegally and should be removed. Now, we can, again, treat them humanely, but that's where the line is drawn. And the citizens of other countries in the world enjoy those rights. You're supposed to have those rights as citizens. That foreigners are not brought in to destroy your economy, destroy your culture, take away your jobs, create crime in your communities, and then stage violent protests when they're being forced to leave. So whose rights is Kamala standing for? It's certainly not the rights of the American people in any way whatsoever. Let's continue. So Donald Trump began responding. This is from Sunday. And he is using very clear language here. Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor, quote unquote, Mayor Bass, it's like he's saying she's not actually the mayor or something, should apologize to the people of Los Angeles for the absolutely horrible job that they have done. And this now includes the ongoing LA riots. These are not protesters. They are troublemakers and insurrectionists. And he says, remember, no masks. But there were masks. There were many masks. He followed up, paid insurrectionists. So he is stating quite clearly that there is an insurrection. He's also saying that they're paid. He's also in various ways, and has at various times said, that they're being paid by foreign entities. So we have foreign insurrectionists being paid and organized by elements of the evil twin faction here in America and by foreign interests as well. But he's saying quite clearly, insurrection. He also said that the real insurrection was on November 3rd, 2020, the day of the stolen election. And they might have insurrected before that too. All the Insurrection Act talk was back in the beginning of June in 2020 in response to the George Floyd riots. So we may well be under the Insurrection Act for the last 5 years. And if that's the case, so be it. People might get upset about that and say, Trump called martial law and he didn't even tell us. Maybe. Would it have been better if he did tell you? Don't think so. I don't know how it could have been. But he's saying quite clearly, paid insurrectionists. This is Gavin Newsom. We saw a little bit of this interview in the Dilly compilation earlier. Here he is being interviewed by one of MSNBC's versions of Rachel Maddow. They have Rachel Maddow, they have Chris Hayes, they have this guy, and then, of course, Karen Bass. I mean, it's just lesbians in glasses all the time. Male lesbians, female lesbians, they, them lesbians, doesn't matter. Just lesbians in glasses. MSNBC is the Lesbians in Glasses Network. Here we are. Gavin Newsom.
Get your hands off these poor people. They're just trying to live their lives, man. Trying to live their lives, paying their taxes. Been here 10 years.
Hard.
The fear, the horror. The hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. You know, I don't give a damn. But I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. And we need to push back. And I'm sorry to be so clear, but that kind of bloviating is exhausting. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
And I think he's talking to Tom Homan there. Gavin Newsom is calling for his own arrest. Arrest me. Make me the martyr. And maybe that's the strategy. Maybe he will be arrested. I don't know. At some point, governor's got to get arrested, right? We can't just allow these criminals, these communists who have violated the Constitution, who have stolen their elections, who have aided in foreign infiltration of our country, the foreign takeover of our country, the usurpation, aided in the success of the Uniparty, implemented the global regime's agenda in their own states. You can't just allow them to ride off into the sunset and have a happy retirement, can we? So unless you're for that, or, you know, you just think nothing's going to happen, I guess that's also possible. Then at some point, we are going to see governors arrested. Gavin Newsom wants to break the seal. Well, here's the thing. The seal was already broken back during the fake and illegitimate Biden administration because they went and arrested Donald J. Trump, the president, the people's president. So will anyone shed a tear for Gavin Newsom? Will that be the signal of the breakdown of our society that we are told it would be? I don't think so. Now, let me see if I can. Here we are. This is Gavin from Sunday once again.
Continues to, as always, hit you hard publicly. Just 10 minutes ago, he put out another Truth Social telling you and the mayor to apologize to the people of Los Angeles. You guys go at it pretty hard publicly, but I know you talk privately. Have you spoken in the last couple of days to the president about any of this?
Yeah, we talked for almost 20 minutes, and this issue never came up. I mean, I kept trying to talk about L.A. He wanted to talk about all these other issues. We had a very decent conversation.
When was this?
This was late Friday night, I think about 1:30 plus his time.
After the protests had started here.
After the protests, and he never once brought up the National Guard. He's a stone-cold liar. He said he did. Stone-cold liar. Never did. It was a very civil conversation. I've always wanted to approach engagement with the President of the United States in a respectful and responsible way. But there's no working with the President. There's only working for him. And I will never work for Donald Trump.
Did you mention it all to him in that phone call on Friday?
Gavin, tough talk, acting the whole time. Gavin is not a talented actor, but a frequent actor. Let's continue. So this is Trump on Sunday addressing the standard for sending in the Marines.
Even if you don't plan to invoke the Insurrection Act, do you plan to send troops to Los Angeles? What? Even if you're not planning to invoke the Insurrection Act, do you still plan to send troops?
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden and his autopen.
What's the bar for sending Marines?
The bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
Sending active Marines on the table, sir. Secretary Hegseth.
We're going to see what we need. We'll send whatever we need to make sure there's law and order.
So law and order, we'll send whatever we need. They asked if he was going to invoke the Insurrection Act. Again, I think that's probably happened a long time ago. He certainly is not going to hesitate to do that. They ask what the bar is. He says the bar is what I say it is. And that's legally and constitutionally correct. It is his call. PJ Corrigan in the chat, $10. It's lesbians in glasses all the way down. Thanks for everything you do, brother. Thank you, PJ, very much for that and for your continued support. And yes, lesbians all the way down. Perhaps that's what's holding up the earth. They make the rockin' world go round. Lesbians in glasses. Now, we talked about Alexander Dugin last week because we had Konstantin von Hofmeister on. I have called Dugin at various points the Steve Bannon of Russia, kind of a philosopher and political philosopher and social critic. He says LA equals Maidan. The same people behind the same goals. Interesting, isn't it? The color revolution in Maidan to take over Ukraine. Same people, same goals as here. Foreign actors, foreign funding, of course, of course. Let's go to Donald Trump. Some video here.
Right around the time that we were walking in here, the governor and the state attorney general said that they're going to sue you for sending the National Guard in. They're saying there's no invasion, there's no rebellion. The president is trying to manufacture chaos and crisis on the ground for his own political ends. Federalizing the California National Guard is an abuse of the president's authority under law.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You watched the same clips as I did. Cars burning all over the place, people rioting. And by the way, we stopped it. We were able to make it much better, but it still looked pretty bad. And in watching clips last night, people were saying this is really a big problem. And until we went in, if we didn't do the job, that place would be burning down just like the houses burned down. They were in big trouble last night, Peter. You know it. And the night before, and the night before that. And I feel we had no choice. I don't want to see happen what happened so many times in this country. I watched Minneapolis burn. Look at what happened in so many different parts of California. You take a look at what happened in San Diego. There's so many different places where we let it burn. We want to be politically correct. We wanted to be nice. We want to be nice to the criminal. And what you're doing is destroying the fabric of our life in this country. No, we did the right thing. We've been given credit by people that I would least suspect. Why I would say that some of the people that came in and said, thank goodness, they said, some of them, thank God that Trump got involved. And I'm very happy I got involved. And I think Gavin, in his own way, is probably happy I got involved. Yeah, go.
Gavin, in his own way, is probably happy that I got involved. And the Donald Trump Gavin Newsom relationship for years has been very interesting. I started calling Gavin our boy New a few months ago. I don't know if people recall that, but he seems to fit that same model as Joe Biden. It's not that he's a good guy. It's not that he's some secret white hat. He's just under control. And I mean, maybe there's something like that. I don't see any reason to believe that there is. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is like his aunt by marriage. He's been deeply involved in corrupt California politics. He's a very close associate of the Getty family. And some of the Getty family are perfectly fine people, I think. But very just shady family. Newsom has always been that way. His father as well, unless it's all a character. Maybe it is a character. It's a ridiculous character. So it's certainly possible. But the Trump and Newsom relationship back in the California fires during the first term, the way that Trump will occasionally talk about him, the role Gavin Newsom played last year or 2 years ago in the fake primary campaign, where he went and debated Ron DeSantis for some reason. Ron DeSantis was going to show everybody how capable and competent he was by destroying the big bad Gavin Newsom. And instead he just pulls gay porn out of his pocket. Ron, what a joke that guy is. Pausing for a second. MH Smoke Fan, $20. Always appreciate you, Chris. Thank you very much. Polymath and on $5. Thank you, Chris, for always being reasonable and always bringing the APL when necessary. And I thought maybe we were going to make it through the whole time, but we're not. Una Panuna. She's doing big things. Big things. Let's get back to Donald Trump commenting again on Gavin. If only I can find it. Here we are.
From that statement is we have an incompetent governor. So I talked about governors, but I didn't talk about he's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order. You had a disaster happening, and they now admit it was a disaster. I watched the chief yesterday, who's a good man, by the way, and he said, well, we're lucky we did this because they were overwhelmed. You saw what was happening. So we did the right thing. Everybody agrees to that. But you have a governor who let the city burn down, didn't want water to be sent down to him. And I sent billions of gallons of water. I wanted to do it in the first term. He wouldn't do it over, I don't know, they have environmental reasons, but there were no environmental reasons. I think it's just a political philosophy. But it's lucky for the people in Los Angeles and in California that we did what we did. We got it just in time. It's still simmering a little bit, but not very much. Yep.
Still simmering a little bit, but not very much. Well, that's fortunate. Let's take just a second here and hit one of these Rumble ads real quickly. 1775 coffee. If you guys still haven't tried it, now's your chance. The 1775 starter kit just dropped, only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits harder than a CNN fact check, the smooth medium roast, and the Vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus. No crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin free, and mold free. Plus, you're also getting a golden spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic. a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's political opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler that says, I don't take life advice or caffeine from a woke sea witch. $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler alert, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio. Grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Start your day with coffee that actually backs what you believe. Do it. Or, make your own life decisions. Actually, only make your own life decisions. Do whatever it is your little heart's desire when it comes to where you are going to purchase your coffee. But supporting Rumble seems like a good thing. I like Rumble, and I think it's worth it. I'm going to hold this, actually. I have a mostly peaceful super cup, but we're going to hold that. Let's skip ahead. So this is a question about Gavin talking about civil war. Just right out in front, this is Trump answering.
Are you worried at all at this moment that talking about him getting arrested could be helpful to his political prospects? Because a lot of people think he wants to be sitting right where you are.
Well, in my case, it was a witch hunt, and everybody knew it. And I was able to explain that during the process. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And it was a total witch hunt. It's proven to be a witch hunt, and you see what's happened. In his case, it really is very obvious. You look at what's happened between the fires, I could name 10 things right now. We talk about the trains. We talk about all of the costs in California. You talk about all of the people that are flowing and destroying life for everyone else. So no, I don't think it's going to help him. I think it's actually very bad for him.
And right around the time that we were walking in here, the governor and the state attorney general said that they're going to sue you for sending the National Guard in. They're saying there's no invasion, there's no rebellion. The president is trying to manufacture chaos and crisis on the ground for his own political ends. Federalizing the California National Guard is an abuse of the president's authority under law.
Well, it's interesting. You watched the same clips as I did. Cars burning all over the place, people rioting. And by the way, we stopped it. We were able to make it much better, but it still looked pretty bad. And in watching clips last night, people were saying this is really a big problem. And until we went in, if we didn't do the job, that place would be burning down just like the houses burned down. They were in big trouble last night, Peter. You know it. And the night before, and the night before that. And I feel we had no choice. I don't want to see happen what happened so many times in this country. I watched Minneapolis burn. Look at what happened in so many different parts of California. You take a look at what happened in San Diego. There's so many different places where we let it burn. We want to be politically correct. We wanted to be nice. We want to be nice to the criminal. And what you're doing is destroying the fabric of our life in this country. No, we did the right thing. We've been given credit by people that I would least suspect.
I think some of that was in the clip from before. And so I don't want to make you listen to that twice. Let's go to whitehouse.gov. This is from Saturday, getting into some of the legal justifications for what Trump is doing and where all of this might be headed. Talking about that lawsuit and the rest of it. Department of Defense security for the protection of Department of Homeland Security functions. So Department of Defense security for the protection of the DHS functions. Numerous incidents of violence and disorder have recently occurred and threaten to continue in response to the enforcement of federal law by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and other U.S. government personnel who are performing federal functions and supporting the faithful execution of federal immigration laws. In addition, violent protests threaten the security of and significant damage to federal immigration detention facilities and other federal property. To the extent that protests or acts of violence directly inhibit the execution of the laws, they constitute a form of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. In light of these incidents and credible threats of continued violence by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, I hereby call into federal service members and units of the National Guard under 10 U.S. Code 12406 to temporarily protect ICE and other U.S. government personnel who are performing federal functions, including the enforcement of federal law, and to protect federal property at locations where protests against these functions are occurring or are likely to occur based on current threat assessments and planned operations. Further, I direct and delegate actions as necessary for the Secretary of Defense to coordinate with the governors of the states and the National Guard Bureau in identifying and ordering into federal service the appropriate members and units of the National Guard under this authority. And he continues on. So 10 U.S. Code section 12406 is the legal focus and justification for all this. I believe that this is what Gavin Newsom and the state of California, via their attorney general, are suing the Trump administration for. Gavin Newsom announced this yesterday on X, formerly Twitter. He says, "We are suing Donald Trump. This is a manufactured crisis. He is creating fear and terror to take over a state militia and violate the U.S. Constitution. The illegal order he signed could allow him to send the military into any state he wishes. Every governor, red or blue, should reject this outrageous overreach. There's a lot of hyperbole out there. This isn't that. This is an unmistakable step toward authoritarianism that threatens the foundation of our republic. We cannot let it stand." Now that is quite interesting. Any state he wishes. How far into this are we? Now, to take a step back, taking over a state militia and violating the Constitution. They're going to sue Donald Trump about his ability to invoke what he invoked and the practical concerns, I guess, involved in 10 U.S. Code 12406. What will the outcome be? Well, either the courts will say Trump is allowed to do this, or if they have some other ruling, you would think then that these portions of the U.S. Code would have to be scaled back. And maybe that's the best case scenario, okay? We're worried about overreaching federal government power. We want things fragmented and decentralized, sent back to the states so that the states can control themselves. Now, there's going to be an adjustment period with all this. What would it mean that a state like California controls itself without the oversight of the federal government? What happens? Well, there's a bunch of leverage points. You might think, well, then California's going to go totally communist and there's nothing that we can do about it. Well, that would kind of be a secession at that point, right? And then they could just be cut off economically from the rest of the United States. Well, that's not going to work very well for California, I mean. With real elections, those politicians would never be elected. With real elections in California, we would have a different California government, and they wouldn't want to be cut off from the rest. But the California wouldn't then be defended by the United States of America. The citizens of California would probably, whatever revolting would look like in California, in a real way, mass noncompliance, the end of the payment of taxes. Trump threatened to withhold federal funds to California just a week or so ago. California, Gavin Newsom responded by saying, well, we're not going to send in California's tax money. So that's its own problem and concern. But across all these issues that we're dealing with a lot of the elements of the usurpation of the Constitution that needs to be unwound. And whether it's unwound by Trump overriding various parts of it and it being proven to the public that it is wise and good, as well as something that can't be stopped by the courts, that's one approach. The other approach would be that suits like this come up and maybe the Democrat governors are successful, and through their success, states' rights are affirmed and put out front. And maybe that's a positive too. So there's a lot of ways to go about this. As I always say, we want the lines painted on the field. We want to know what the rules are so that then we can go out and play the game. Let's get the rules all settled and we can work from there. This is CBS covering the lawsuit yesterday. California sues Trump administration for deploying National Guard to Los Angeles. Unprecedented power grab. California sued the Trump administration on Monday after the state's National Guard was deployed to respond to protesters in Los Angeles, calling the move an unprecedented power grab. In the lawsuit filed in federal court, attorneys for the state said President Trump unlawfully bypassed California Governor Gavin Newsom by putting National Guard troops under federal control without the governor's permission. The troops were deployed to protect federal property and personnel under a law that lets the president call the National Guard into federal service during a quote-unquote rebellion. But California's lawsuit argues this law does not apply to the tense protest that Los Angeles has faced over immigration and customs enforcement operations. At no point in the past 3 days has there been a rebellion or an insurrection, nor have these protests risen to the level of protests or riots that Los Angeles and other major cities have seen at points in the past, including in recent years. The lawsuit also states the law cited by the Trump administration, Section 12406, explicitly requires orders to call up the National Guard to go through governors who normally control their own National Guard forces. And then they go into, of course, the practical concerns and the emotional arguments. I haven't read the suit in full, but I did scan it quickly and saw those kinds of arguments being made. This is Rob Bonta, the California Attorney General, put in place through fake and fraudulent elections, commenting on the lawsuit. This is the official statement from his office. And I just want to do the quotes here. President Trump's order calling federalized National Guard troops into Los Angeles over the objections of the governor and local law enforcement is unnecessary and counterproductive. It's also deeply unfair to the members of the National Guard who are hard at work every day protecting our state, preparing for and responding to emergencies, and training so that, if called, they can fight our nation's wars. Let me be clear, there is no invasion, there is no rebellion. The president is trying to manufacture chaos and crisis on the ground for his own political ends. Federalizing the California National Guard is an abuse of the president's authority under the law and not one we take lightly. We're asking a court to put a stop to the unlawful, unprecedented order. So that's not much for the legal argument there, but quite a bit for the practical and emotional arguments. And we don't have to hear from Gavin again. Let's go to the machine for just a moment. I asked ChatGPT to tell me a bit about the president's authority to call in the National Guard. It says Trump or any president has substantial but not total authority to federalize the National Guard, even over a governor's objection. The legal authority rests primarily on statutory law and precedent rather than constitutional provision alone. The president's power to federalize the National Guard comes from several statutes, especially 12406, but it lists some others as well. These sections of the Insurrection Act and related provisions allow the president to call the Guard into federal service in case of invasion, insurrection, or when federal laws are being obstructed. And we have invasion, the illegal immigration. We have the insurrection, the fake elections, and we have, and also the disruptions to the peace and the rest of what they're doing in terms of the violence and the rest of it. And we have federal laws being obstructed. And that was the initial spark of this. The federal law enforcement officials were being prevented from doing their jobs, not only by the protesters, quote unquote, on the ground, but also by the politicians, state and local politicians. So they say this provision in 12406 allows the president to federalize the Guard in case of insurrection against state governments that cannot be controlled by the state alone. And so then we would see, it doesn't seem like the state is able to control it. And you have to wonder if governors like Gavin Newsom actually realize at some point, hey, we're in over our heads and the global regime is actually going to destroy me. So in response, my only choice is to help Trump. I don't know how these control mechanisms actually work in a real world sense. But again, it seems like a plausible possibility that is worth exploring. Going on about the Insurrection Act, 10 U.S. Code sections 251 through 255 allows the federal intervention to suppress rebellion, enforce federal law, or protect civil rights. It does not require a governor's request in cases where federal laws are obstructed or civil rights are denied. They cite prior examples, Eisenhower, George H.W. Bush, and Trump 2020. Not federalizing the National Guard, but threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act during the BLM riots. It's also worth noting that we hear and have heard many times over the last few days about the National Guard being sent in to help with the desegregation in the states, in the South, during the quote unquote civil rights era. They go into the Posse Comitatus Act and how it limits the federal troops for domestic law enforcement. And that may well be true, but again, doesn't matter. Skipping down just a bit here. Oh no, we can leave that there. That's fine. Let us continue. Let's go back to Gavin Newsom here. This is from last night.
I mean, it's, again, sober and serious moment. Meanwhile, can I just add, and this is why I told the president, just get it over with. Arrest me. Move on. If you need some head to scalp, do it with me, but stop messing with these kids. Stop messing with 4-year-olds, kids in elementary school. We've got kids. We have hundreds of graduations down here. Kids are not going to their own graduations. Families, grandparents here legally, mixed status families in some cases, scared to death to go to a graduation. People are scared to walk down the streets. It's not just Home Depots, getting their car washed. We have incidences. I didn't believe it because what was I thinking? I actually believed when they said this is not true. But then I saw videos. They're doing checkpoints, checking people's IDs. We've never seen this kind of deployment in so many actions. It's mass panic out here in the nation's largest county, in the nation's largest state. Good, hardworking people, decent people. These are not the criminals. These are not the thugs.
Well, I guess that depends on your definition of what criminals and thugs are. If people are here illegally, they're breaking the law. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, actually has, statutorily, this is the law, 100 miles as the crow flies from all our borders to do exactly this sort of enforcement. And that included in that are our coastlines as well. So don't know what Gavin Newsom's talking about there, but again, you hear the emotional arguments about the people whose lives are being affected. The residents are scared. They're scared to go to work. They're scared to go to graduations. And the graduation thing, it's just a weird extra topic. Not entirely sure why that is such a focus. Maybe it's just because that was happening this weekend. It's graduation time or something. But I also think that it might be about the linkage to the teachers' unions and the fact that the teachers' unions are a massive Democrat power base in the country. The teachers' unions are a huge force in California. And the school situation in California is directly linked to the illegal alien problem. It's one of the things that has destroyed California schools. It makes the classrooms grow outside the bounds of control of any teacher. Not that they have great teachers in the first place, but yeah, the school system there is nuts. So all this stuff is connected. And then we'll see Randy Weingarten as part of Randy Weingarten, the president of the major teachers union, is just right at the forefront of this protest movement and this No Kings organization that we will hopefully get to in a second. I don't want to go crazy long today, but this may be my only episode of the week. So I don't want to miss the opportunity to note this because I think it's going to be important in the future, especially leading into the weekend, because we still have the birthday party, the nation's 250th birthday party, in addition to Trump's birthday, in addition to the 250th anniversary of the Continental Army forming on Saturday, June 14th. And I think that, it's actually clear, it's stated by them, there is a direct correlation between these events. These events, this ramp up into violence and chaos and protest is happening to attempt to counter the military parade for the weekend. So this is Gavin Newsom responding to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance said, "Do your job. That's all we're asking." Newsom said, "Do your job. We didn't have a problem until Trump got involved. Rescind the order. Return control to California." So Gavin Newsom does not have control of his state. It's being controlled by someone other than Gavin, apparently. This is Stephen Miller responding on X, formerly Twitter, to Gavin Newsom's post, assuming I can pull this up. Miller says, Miller, by the way, the master of hatred, the world-class hater, didn't have a problem. Your state is a criminal sanctuary for millions of illegal alien invaders, cartel killers, foreign terrorists, transnational gangs, and insurrectionist mobs. Huge swaths of the city where I was born now resemble failed third world nations, a ruptured, balkanized society of strangers. When our courageous ICE officers fighting to rescue your communities came under violent organized attack, you and the LA mayor left them unforgivably to fend for themselves. When the rioters swarmed you, handed over your streets willingly, you still refused to arrest and prosecute the arsonists, seditionists, and insurrectionists. This administration is fighting to save the city and the citizens you have left to struggle and suffer. And it's hard to see where he's wrong there. This is from MSNBC, but the War Room grabbed this in their cold open. A very interesting point being made here that Trump's military is a different military now than it used to be.
Context of the massive military parade that Donald Trump is throwing for himself in Washington, D.C. this coming weekend to mark his birthday, as well as the anniversary, the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. Donald Trump craves and always has craved sort of militarized shows of force. That is endemic to who he is as a political figure. He wants to surround himself with shows of force and strength. And he was shocked and furious to find that many military leaders in his first term didn't share his views of the politicization of the military that Donald Trump had in mind for his presidency. This time around, he's finding it much easier to have his demands met. He has a different kind of defense secretary in Pete Hegseth. He's already fired his first chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he has the ability now to create these spectacles almost on demand, and I anticipate that he will continue to do so.
He has a different military now, and Hegseth is there. It kind of sounds like she's saying in the first term, he had those TV generals, and now he's got those real generals, and they are going to side with the president. And that's some writer at The Atlantic. I don't recognize her face. It may have popped up on the screen and I missed it, but her name, I mean. That is The Atlantic admitting that the military is on the side of Donald Trump. So what is that going to mean for their coup attempt, their attempts to remove Donald Trump? None of it's going to succeed. All right. And they've got it under control. She is saying that that is just a dress rehearsal. And perhaps the weekend was a dress rehearsal. Here is that defense secretary, Pete Hegseth. assuming I can find these. Will I? Deterrence starts at home. There we are.
Deterrence starts at home, and it starts with securing our borders. We will achieve 100% operational control of the southern border, with crossings already dropped 99.9%. It also starts in our neighborhood in the Western Hemisphere. As you know, as we've said, the Indo-Pacific is our priority theater, and China our pacing threat. That's why I've traveled twice to the Indo-Pacific region to meet with our allies and partners, and they have responded. As we shift in that direction, President Trump looks to those allies and partners to step up, to share in the burden of their own defense. He also sees them, as I do, as force multipliers alongside the United States, and we are making progress in that. As the President has rightly pointed out, it's only fair that our allies and partners do their part. We can't want their security more than they do.
Indeed. Deterrence starts at home. So he was in the Congress today for that hearing. And of course, they have to have a reason why they're there. And so they make it about how much it's going to cost. And they were hammering him on the financials of what this military excursion would require. And you've probably seen the headlines today. They're saying it's going to cost $134 million. And that money can be going to all these important things. Really? Well, what about all the billions of dollars you were spending overseas via USAID? How come they never make the argument that the money could be spent elsewhere in those situations? Now, you might also remember from 2020 and prior, the defund the police operation.
Thank you for the question. You are right. We are both originally from Minnesota, which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned a police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground, and also allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly handled by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or Los Angeles.
I have limited time. I asked a budget
and they
question.
Are being,
Could the Secretary please address the budget? Thank you.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe ICE agents should be allowed to be safe in doing their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020. There are 17,000 LAPD, you mentioned that. There would be 18,000 if not for the defund movement that folks like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have implemented. The police chief said she was overwhelmed,
so we helped. If the Secretary's not going to ask the budgetary questions, I will yield back my time if the Secretary refuses to answer the budgetary questions I put before.
Defund the police. It has its consequences. Let's go back to Gavin quickly. This is from last night.
When does this come to a head? Is this are you hoping for an injunction in the courts?
We're going to immediately seek that first thing tomorrow morning. Absolutely. Look, that's all we got left. There's one, maybe two branches of government left. Sure as hell ain't the legislature.
Right.
I mean, Speaker Johnson, what a joke he is. Completely missing in action. You know, he's got to clean up his own mess. He's got one of the most dangerous districts in America. 6 times, I think, the murder rate of Nancy Pelosi's district. Why the hell are they talking about that on Fox News? Where's Donald Trump talking about the carnage in Speaker Johnson's district? But the real carnage is complete neglect. I mean, this is a guy who's complicit in increasing the national debt. Talk about our kids and grandkids, another $2.5 trillion. So we're holding hope, out of hope. Founding fathers, 3 co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, rule of law, and the courts need to intervene. And we've won more than we've lost. And California sued more than any other state in the country. And here we go, one more.
Good luck. The three branches are disappearing. What does it mean? It's kind of incredible, isn't it? Separation of powers. Separation of powers. I mean, the constitutional order was already eroded. It's already gone. What is it that we are clinging to? What we are clinging to is the mythology. If we care about the mythology, then we need to figure out how to make it real and practical once again, rather than accepting this status quo under the pretense that it actually represents that mythology. Let's go back to Gavin one more time.
So what would be your message to him right now this evening?
Stand back, rescind this absurd, illegal, and
stand back and stand by
immoral order. Let our military go home. The absurdity of threatening the people of the United States of America with their own military, our proud military, these remarkable men and women in uniform that do heroic work. Really proud of our Marines. I feel for them right now. I feel for our National Guard to be there. In the fact that we had to send the PD, our local PD, to protect our own National Guard because they're being used as pawns. Mr. President, show some decency, show some humanity. More importantly, act like the commander-in-chief. If you want to be president, you might as well play the part as president. At least fake it. Do the right thing. Stand back, and we'll clean up your mess.
Man, Gavin is really something. Let's hear from California's the other illegitimate leader at the heart of this situation. Angelinos, know your rights. Stay safe. Stay informed, says Karen Bass yesterday. Here is what her little post says under Know Your Rights. And she has this translated into Spanish, and perhaps that's Chinese. I don't know. If officers ask you questions, you have the right to say, I choose to remain silent. Who is she telling these rights to? It seems to be illegal aliens. Number 2, you have the right to consult with an attorney before answering any questions or signing any documents. If you have valid U.S. immigration documents, carry them with you. Never carry false documents or lie about your immigration status. No law enforcement officer can enter your home without your permission unless that officer has a warrant signed by a judge. An administrative warrant from the Department of Homeland Security does not give officers the right to enter your home against your will. And there could be an interesting contest there as well as to whether or not illegal aliens enjoy that same right. This is Karen Bass from her press conference yesterday. And apparently the mainstream media did not run this press conference. These people are a disaster, but here we go.
We need to stop the raids. This should not be happening in our city. It is not warranted, and the only thing it does is contribute to chaos. This was chaos that was started in Washington, D.C. On Thursday, the city was peaceful. On Friday, it was not, because of the intervention of the federal government.
Now, that is awfully hard to believe. It is all a result of the federal government. That is what she's saying. Stephen Miller responded to that clip as well on X, formerly Twitter, saying the threat being made here by Mayor Bass is explicit. The mayor of LA is effectively saying the mob violence is caused by the mere presence of ICE in the city, and the violence against ICE will not stop unless federal law enforcement is withdrawn from the city. This is the definition of insurrection. Los Angeles and California leadership demand the right to illegally import unlimited foreigners into America to control America's entire immigration policy by fiat. And if they are not so permitted, they will allow mobs to target ICE with impunity. Los Angeles and California are demanding the nullification of election results, of federal law, of national sovereignty, and of the bedrock constitutional command of one national government. And again, he is great at this. That is impossible to dispute. What does he mean when he's saying they're trying to nullify election results? He's saying it doesn't matter that Trump was overwhelmingly supported and resoundingly, quote unquote, elected by the American people, and that the American people back him now, and that immigrants back him in what he's doing right now. None of that matters. They don't care. They're going to override him anyway because the system as they set it up maintains priority over the president, even though the president is meant to run that system. Well, they took that away. Now they have puppets installed everywhere, uniparty members who just implement the agenda. And that agenda and that system take precedent over everything. So if the president is not doing their bidding in implementing that agenda, well, the president has to be overridden. The elections, out the window. All of it, just out the window. Federal law doesn't matter. National sovereignty, who cares? The federal government cannot defend our borders. And one national government, I mean, that is a bedrock constitutional principle, but maybe not the best one. And we'll have to see how that goes in the future. But he makes a great point. What would it be like if the states just chose their immigration policies for themselves and the federal government could not enforce any of it whatsoever? And they were counted in the census, and we had to send them money based on the appropriations were based on their population. The amount of federal aid, the number of seats in Congress are based on those populations. California's going to lose a whole lot of power if they lose a million illegal aliens. Or what if it's 2 million? What if it's 5 million? What if, so it's 1 million just in LA. Is there another million around San Francisco? There are a bunch of big cities in California. Sacramento's pretty big. San Diego's pretty big. There are illegal immigrants all over California. What if it's 3 million? What if it's 5 million? What if it's 10 million? All of a sudden, California, the population is shrunk dramatically, and their political influence, as well as their number of electoral college votes, are both dropped substantially. What would it mean if all of these Democrat states can just decide their own immigration policies, the states decide their own voting policies, the people have nothing to do with it? Do we have, 22 Democrat states? Do we have 22 just communist enclaves now where the people have no rights? Seems like we're headed quickly in that direction. Not to be scary about it, because I think that we are going to be out of this and be just fine, but it really seems like we're going in that direction, or we're headed in that direction, and now it's going to be stopped and reversed at least. Okay, let's take another second and do another quick ad, and then we'll get back to the show. And this is for Rumble Premium. Rumble Premium is important to the survival and success of the Rumble platform. The Rumble platform is the only place that has, without fail, protected our free speech for the last 5 years. When Rumble first started in 2013, they built the platform for the small creator. They didn't censor or have biases. They were fair and treated all creators equally. No one thought the platforms would censor political conversation or opinions, but they did. Rumble did not. They held the line. They are attacked daily for giving us a voice to talk to you. They're attacked in corporate media. They're attacked by governments like France. They're attacked from brand advertisers who refuse to work with them. Corporate America is fighting to remove speech. Rumble is fighting to keep it. Rumble won't survive with brand advertisers. They don't get much of it. Watching our show on Rumble is the most they can ask. But if you really believe in the fight and you have the means, one major way to help is by joining Rumble Premium. You just go to rumble.com/premium and use promo code STUDIO. You get $10 off when you purchase an annual subscription. If you have the means and believe in the cause, now's the time to join Rumble Studio. If you don't have the means, we're just happy if you continue to watch us here on Rumble. So sign up for that if you can, and if you want to. And if you enjoy the Rumble chat on the paid subscriber episodes, that is, having Rumble Premium is the only way to watch the paid subscriber episodes on Rumble. All right, man. Still a bunch I want to get to. I'm not sure how possible it's all going to be, so I'm kind of editing on the fly here, trying to figure out what is necessary, and there is no way that we can avoid or leave out this particular subject, the funding and organization of these events. This is just the news from yesterday. Exclusive FBI's Patel, that's Kash Patel, says Bureau investigating funding behind the anti-ICE riots in LA. Kash Patel told Just the News the Bureau is investigating the money trail. He said the FBI is investigating any and all monetary connections responsible for these riots. They talk about Claudia Scheinbaum in here. She has suggested that Mexico is going to fight back against some of the anti-illegal immigrant policies being implemented. One of those in particular, I didn't realize how big an issue this was until this morning. I think it was Jim Rickards on War Room talking about the remittances. So illegal aliens come to the United States. They earn money in the United States and they send it back to Mexico. And it is something like, it's an enormous portion of Mexican income. And it funds the government and it funds the cartels. So cutting off remittances actually harms Mexico in extraordinary ways. So they are trying to fight back against all of this. And of course, what we could be seeing may be cartel run and cartel influenced. And we'll get to some more of that in the future. But rather than focusing on that article related to the funding, I want to focus on the organization behind it called No Kings. This is the protest movement this summer. We had BLM in 2020. Now we have, quote unquote, No Kings. And why is it called No Kings? Donald Trump is going to act like a king, or Donald Trump actually is already a king. And what would that mean? What would it mean to be the head of a military government? Now, it's worth mentioning always that Donald Trump is the most responsive American politician to feedback from the American people that we have ever seen. Certainly in my lifetime, I'm guessing all of yours as well, and maybe many lifetimes. He is the most responsive. So to the extent that he's any kind of king or dictator, he's one that is primarily concerned with implementing the will of the American people, it seems. Now, he's also influencing the will of the American people, but that is by creating divisive arguments, and the argument then forms a consensus on one side or another, and then Trump implements the will of that consensus. And we've seen this process play out a number of times. I've talked about it extensively in many, many podcast episodes. I think there was one that I called Divider in Chief. Let me just check that really quickly. That would make that argument in full. Yes, Divider in Chief, August 1st of 2024. You can go back on the Substack. I'm your moderator.substack.com and find that using the search feature. This is Axios from today. What to know about counter protests to Donald Trump's June 14th parade. Protest events planned for June 14th. Look at all of that. Of course, the big cities, big events. What is that? 21 events listed in Los Angeles there. Even more than that in San Francisco. Even more than that in, I guess this is New England. All of these down in New York, New Jersey area, all around the country. Small Texas towns, small towns in Nebraska, Rapid City, South Dakota, Spearfish, Pierre, Bismarck, Dickinson. That's incredible. These aren't major urban centers, but nonetheless, No Kings is holding protests. Protesters are taking to the streets and community hubs nationwide on Saturday in what organizers expect will be the largest single-day anti-President Trump rally since the start of his second administration. This is what the organizers say. The widespread movement will run counter to Trump's multi-million-dollar military parade in D.C. And you can already detect the biases of this quote-unquote journalist. This is an advertisement for No Kings. No Kings is a nationwide day of defiance, organizers wrote. From city blocks to small towns, from courthouse steps to community parks, we're taking action to reject authoritarianism. More than 100 pro-democracy advocacy groups are partnering to organize the No Kings events. Donald Trump wants tanks in the street and made-for-TV display of dominance for his birthday, the No Kings website said. Give me a break. A spectacle meant to look like strength, but real power isn't staged in Washington. It rises up everywhere else. Guess we'll see, commies. Good luck. Trump on Tuesday said that any protest during Saturday's parade would be met with very big force, and that probably means in Washington, D.C., but we'll see what it means around the country. Millions of people are estimated to protest in more than 1,800 rallies across 50 states and commonwealths, including Puerto Rico, organizers said. I have very strong doubts that millions of people are going to come out. Some international rallies are also planned in countries including Colombia, Malawi, Italy, Portugal, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Why? Why are other countries protesting Donald Trump? And why is this organization involved with those other countries? So they're talking about the military expenditures. There will be no organized protest in D.C. Leah Greenberg of Indivisible, one of the partner groups, says we want to create contrast, not conflict. The choice to hold No Kings events in every city but D.C. is a deliberate choice to keep the focus on contrast and not give the Trump administration an opportunity to stoke and then put the focus on the conflict. Again, give me a break. So they talk here, they reference the hands-off, May Day, and 50-51 events from a couple of months ago. They're saying April's hands-off event saw at least 3.5 million people join by the organizers' count, far surpassing the 500,000 RSVPs it garnered. Now, I can tell you there's very little chance of that being true. 500,000 RSVPs and 7 times that many people showed up at rallies around the country? No. Did any of those rallies look like big rallies? No, they didn't. We saw them. The biggest ones were like 20,000 people. 3.5 million all around the country? No way. And 20,000, if that. These were the rallies that were just like Kamala rallies. Okay? We saw them. We talked about them. They were ridiculous. There was not 3.5 million people out there. So let's go to the No Kings website and see their partners. Here is the front page and their about page, by the way. In America, we don't do kings. They've defied our courts, deported Americans, disappeared people off the streets, attacked our civil rights, and slashed our services. Slashed our services. The corruption has gone too far. Gone too. Period. Far. Period. Spell check your website, commies. No thrones, no crowns, no kings. Now, let's look at a couple of these No Kings pages here. What's going on with my internet? There we go. Oh, I was already on the social page. Oh, well. So again, here's the map of their events. You can attend training calls for different sorts of training. No Kings call for veterans and military families. What's next in the fight? Mass call. I am half tempted to register and get the call-in information and then listen in, but I don't know if I really want these people having my information, and I don't want to be involved with that sort of thing. I'll never stop getting text messages from them. This is the host toolkit. It explains what the organization is. No Kings is a national day of action and mass mobilization in response to the increasing authoritarian excesses and corruption of the Trump administration. We've watched as they've cracked down on free speech, detained people for their political positions, threatened to deport American citizens, and defied the courts. They've done all this while continuing to serve and enrich their billionaire allies. They think they rule, but we are bigger than even their worst aspirations. President Trump is planning a military parade in Washington, D.C. on June 14th. This display of might is intended to intimidate opponents and solidify his image as a strongman on our dime. We won't stand by while that happens. Well, no, it's not on your dime. Also, Trump is paying for part of it, at least. That's what he said. In addition, it's not to solidify his image as a strongman, but it may be to show that the military is behind him. Instead of allowing this military parade to be the center of gravity, we will make action everywhere else the story of America that day. Well, the media will certainly amplify those events. They note that Juneteenth pride events and veteran celebrations will all be happening at the same times. Trump thinks his rule is absolute, but in America, we don't do kings. We are united against kings. He's already indicated that he's aiming for at least a third term. Now he's planning a self-aggrandizing military parade. He's gone too far. This shit is hilarious. Now oh man, I didn't even have that part of the website pulled up. Apologies. There's no point in going back to it now, but you can hit Toolkit and it opens up another window. Apologies. So let's go to their partners here. Look at all of these commie organizations involved. First and foremost, 5051. Okay. They're the organizers, along with Indivisible, and numerous indivisible organizations are listed here. Where are we? Here we are. Indivisible, the main thing. Indivisible East Bay, Indivisible Evanston, Frederick, Maryland, Morgan County, West Virginia, Polk, Florida, South Bay, Los Angeles, Indivisible Tri-Valley, Greenpeace, Human Rights Campaign. What else do we have here? Families Over Billionaires. That Courage 2025. Well, that looks exactly like the Obama logo. There's another one in here that looks exactly like the Obama logo as well. Bernie Sanders, various unions, Bend the Arc, Jewish Action, the ACLU, the American Humanist Association. Let's keep going. Where are we? Look at the commie fists all over the place. You got to love their logos. The Michigan Resistance Coalition, Move On, Moms Rising Together, Music Declares Emergency. There's a Face the Music organization up there. Mennonite Action. There's a Face the Music, by the way, is started by an organization that's called like Movement for Millionaires or something like that. Planned Parenthood, Pride at Work with the Commie Fist, feminist organization with the Commie Fist. It's incredible. Here's another Commie Fist, and it looks like it has Freemason, what do they call them? The protractor. Resist Trump. This is like 100 plus communist organizations involved with this list. And they probably have compiled all of their email lists into this one central hub. All of these people are being contacted in an attempt to mobilize them. And the responses, the number of people who open their emails and the rest of it, they will track those. And that is probably where they're getting their estimates for attendees, I would imagine. But that's an incredible list of partners. Now, what you can do once you've, you can go through that list of partners and go to influencewatch.org or look them up in other places and find out who's involved with those organizations and who's funding them. And you will consistently see Soros, the Tides Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Carnegie, all of the philanthropists, the globalist philanthropists who fund everything, are also funding those organizations. So all the money is flowing in to this central hub. And they've got to figure out something to make up for Act Blue, because you remember that the funding to Black Lives Matter was being filtered through Act Blue, and their fiscal umbrella company was called Thousand Currents, run by a woman named Susan Rosenberg, who was part of the May 19th Communist Organization that bombed the Capitol. A worse attack by far than January 6th. And she was pardoned by none other than Bill Clinton. Now, we're kind of running fairly long here. I want to point out a couple more things here on the website, and then we will move toward wrapping it up. Okay, so look at the organization. You are able to get from them flyers, signs, printed materials, all these different graphics, these signs that will be held this weekend. This is what democracy looks like. If there's money for a parade, then there's money for Medicaid. Americans against oligarchy. Who brought in the oligarchy? Did Donald Trump create the oligarchy? Or was that the global regime and its oligarchs in the uniparty apparatus implementing the regime's agenda? That's how we had the oligarchy, through fake elections that enabled the oligarchy's formation. It wasn't Donald Trump who did that. This is, let's skip that one. Editing on the fly again. So last night, Tom Homan appeared on, or maybe this was this morning. Tom Homan appeared, no, sorry, it was yesterday, but it looks like Morning Joe. So in the morning yesterday, border czar Tom Homan clarifying the purpose of these raids.
Were there public safety threats in the fashion district and at that Home Depot in these raids we've seen?
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about. The fashion district wasn't an immigration raid. It was the service of 3 criminal warrants at locations based on a large criminal conspiracy that ICE have been investigating. That has to do with money laundering, tax evasion, and customs fraud, where a company underdeclared over $80 million in goods, failed to pay $17 million in fees, and it's part of an overall conspiracy on numerous businesses that they believe that some of this money is being laundered in Mexico and Colombia, the fund cartel activity. So this was a criminal investigation that they all responded to in the beginning. That's how it all started. But the facts never got out. Even though we put the facts out, the media didn't cover it. They just said immigration raids, we're separating families and all the negative information we hear all the time. We took a lot of bad people off the street last couple of days. A Vietnamese national that attended a graduation party was kicked out and came back and killed 2 young people, two young Americans. We arrested a child predator. We arrested someone for sexual misconduct. Someone arrested for committed armed robbery. We arrested numerous gang members. What ICE did the last couple of days is make Los Angeles safer by taking public safety threats off the street.
So that is very interesting. A mass criminal conspiracy involving money laundering in addition to these other crimes. All of a sudden you begin to get into RICO when we're talking about foreign insurrectionists, foreign funders, and the rest of it. Money laundering connected to these ICE raids. So there has to be an immigrant element for ICE to be involved. Money laundering. Now, you might remember back in early 2020, there was a money laundering and counterfeiting operation in Minneapolis that was busted, that was being run out of the club that Derek Chauvin and George Floyd were working at. Now, is this a similar sort of thing? I don't know, but it's something to keep in the back of your head, okay? What we're seeing is the disruption of parts of the criminal enterprise, and the reaction could very well be to the disruption of the criminal enterprise. It's not, again, a grassroots effort against, on behalf of these illegal aliens who we really need in our communities. It's not that. It's definitely not that. And the money laundering thing presents a different layer to it. And I'm very interested to see where that part of the story goes. Let's do a couple quick clips from Donald Trump, and then we will get out of here. Let's see what we have. This, I believe, maybe this was from today. I think this was yesterday.
Grossly incompetent. Everybody knows.
He's talking about Newsom.
About the people causing all the problems. Are they people ICE is trying to deport, or are they professional agitators? The people that are causing the problem are professional agitators. They're insurrectionists. They're bad people. They should be in jail.
All right, it's going to be a busy
Insurrectionists, and let's quickly slide to Trump addressing the insurrectionists today.
An insurrection, I would certainly invoke it. We'll see, but I can tell you last night was terrible. The night before that was terrible. We have, as you've seen, it was on most of your networks, people with big, heavy hammers pounding the concrete and pounding curbs, pounding it, breaking up all, and handing these big chunks of concrete to people. And they were taking that concrete, going up on bridges and dropping it into the roof of a car. They were throwing it at our police. They were throwing it at our soldiers that are there. And we got it stopped, and we have them in custody right now. Look, if we didn't get involved, right now, Los Angeles would be burning, just like it was burning a number of months ago with all the houses that were lost. Los Angeles right now would be on fire, and we have it in great shape. We're not playing around.
How will you determine whether or not there is an insurrection?
Well, you'll take a look at what's happening. I mean, I could tell you there were certain areas of Los Angeles that you could have called it an insurrection. It was terrible. But these are paid insurrectionists. These are paid troublemakers. They get money. And when you take a look at what they do, where they show up and everyone's saying, what's he doing? He's pounding the curbs. This one guy's pounding the curb, breaking the curb, and handing big pieces of granite. In some cases, it's granite and concrete to other people. And they're running out with it. And then we watch the other people, and they try and throw it into the face of the soldiers, throw it into the face of the police, and they hurt some people very badly. They go up on bridges, they drop it down on the cars as the cars are moving. They're not breaking the curb because they're doing a demolition service. They're breaking it to hand out to people as a weapon. It's bad stuff. I've never seen that before.
One more from Trump today. So, to be clear, he said, if there was an insurrection, I would certainly invoke the Insurrection Act. Does that apply retroactively? I would suggest that it probably does.
These protests obviously started in reaction to these large-scale ICE operations in Los Angeles. Should people expect to see similar operations in the rest of the country?
Yeah.
And will similar protests see similar response?
As you know, we're moving murderers out of our country that were put here by Biden or the autopen. The autopen really did. I mean, the people, whether it's Lisa Monaco or whoever operated the autopen, these are criminals. The people are criminals that allowed these criminals into our country. And I don't think that Biden knew what the hell he was doing. I don't think he even knew about it. But when they opened up our borders for the whole world to come in, yeah, we're going to get them out. We're getting them out. We're starting to get acknowledgement from the courts that, there's a system. They come in without courts and they go out, they want trials and everything else. I think that's starting to work out now. Judges are starting to see what a terrible situation it is. Many of those people that you saw on television last night are criminals that were allowed into our country by Biden. And they want to stay, and we don't want them. And they come from jails, and they come from mental institutions, and they come from all over the world, not just South America. And we're not going to let them stay. And this is the first, perhaps, of many, or perhaps, if we didn't attack this one very strongly, you'd have them all over the country. But I can inform the rest of the country that when they do it, if they do it, they're going to be met with equal or greater force than we met right here. We did a great job. The people, you, Christy, and Tom Holman, and all of the people, Pete Hegseth, all of the people involved did an amazing job. We stopped a disaster. And it looks like a planned disaster, this didn't just happen. They had weapons, they had tools, they had everything you needed. I mean, they were throwing iced water in bottles, in glass bottles, at officers and at soldiers. These are, you could not use the word insurrection, but you could also use the word, these are very dangerous people, they're bad people. They were met with heavy force and they folded. And they may be there a little bit tonight, they may be there a little bit, but it seems to be getting less and less because they're going there and they're met with a very heavy force. And if they weren't, you would have that city right now would be on fire. It would be burning down. The rest of it, what's left over. Because the other fire was started because they wouldn't allow water into LA. They wouldn't allow water into California because they had it all shifted out to the Pacific Ocean. And I turned it around. And I told them to do it in my first term, and they didn't do it. We had COVID, and they didn't do it. And I told them to do it. We did it in the second. Now we have billions of gallons.
All right, so we can leave that there. Similar operations will take place in the rest of the country to the extent they're needed. It's pretty clear. And we can leave on this note right here. A headline from Politico today. Trump team plans to send thousands of migrants to Guantanamo starting as soon as this week. Okay. The Trump administration is planning to dramatically ramp up sending undocumented migrants to Guantanamo Bay starting this week, with at least 9,000 people being vetted for transfer, according to documents obtained by Politico. That would be an exponential increase from the roughly 500 migrants who've been held for short periods at the base since February, and a major step toward realizing a plan President Donald Trump announced in January to use the facility to hold as many as 30,000 migrants. The transfers to Guantanamo could start as soon as Wednesday, the documents state. The expectation is that the detainees would be at the facility temporarily before being deported to their countries of origin. And we will see how that situation evolves as well. And I think we're going to have to leave it there for today. There is a chance that I will be able to do a show tomorrow, although I'm going to be on Story Hour tonight. We're talking about the film Big Fish. And then in the morning, I'm going to be, Ash and I swapped this week. So I will be on Badlands Daily tomorrow morning. And then I will be out of town. So there's a slight chance I'll be able to do one tomorrow before I leave if there's something major, or perhaps Friday. But otherwise, that'll probably be it. I'm going to hit one more Rumble ad here that they have for me before the end of the show. And this is for Truth Social, where you can find me, of course, at I'm Your Moderator. That is one of my two primary social media platforms. If you're looking for a great place online for news, discussion, and entertainment, then check out Truth Social, Donald Trump's social media website. You'll get breaking news and commentary from top media figures. If you want to see Trump's legendary Truth Social posts, then get on Truth Social today. Join a growing community of patriots on a free speech platform designed to avoid censorship and cancellation by big tech. Make your voice heard. Join the movement. Join Truth Social. Checking in on Substack. I hope you guys all had a good time over there. I see some activity in the chat and those little heart things floating toward the top of the screen. So I guess that's good. YouTube, thank you guys all very much for tuning in. Checking on Rumble. Thank you all very much. Thanks for hanging out. Thank you for all the kind words. Thank you for all the Rumble rants. Go ahead and hit the thumbs up if you are listening or watching on Rumble. And with that, I will be back very likely Monday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden was never president.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
What's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more
more true than I would perhaps prefer.
Let you down.
We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.